You're listening to the Alpha's Love Stories, romantic audiobooks that will make your heart race. Don't forget to subscribe for more enchanting love tales. Chapter 1. The Girl Who Spoke to No One. Some people live their whole lives in noise. She lived in silence. Eldon Hollow was the kind of village that forgot itself every winter. Houses hunched low beneath sodden thatch. Wooden fences leaned like tired men after a storm. Chickens, thin as rumors, pecked at the mud. If you came at dawn, you could hear iron song from the smithy and smell old bread revived with steam. If you came at dusk, you could watch a small congregation pull night over themselves like a blanket they weren't sure they deserved. They feared the forest, the way children fear mirrors in a dark room. They feared the girl the way a wounded animal fears a calm hand. They called her Lyra because someone had to. No one remembered who spoke it first. It wasn't written in the parish books. It wasn't stitched into any cradle blanket. It seemed to rise up out of thin air, the way mist does off the river when the water is warmer than the sky. Lyra, light on the tongue. Wrong in the mouth. She had arrived 5 winters ago, curled like a comma in the river reeds, so cold that her hair had frozen into glass needles. She clutched a crescent pendant, silver dull and warm against her blue skin, a contradiction that made even the bravest of them step back. The blacksmith's wife had wrapped her in a horse blanket, pressing breath into Lyra's lips as if trying to inflate the idea of a life into a body that did not seem to want it. Lyra had opened her eyes, flat gray then, like unlit pewter, and made no sound at all. She didn't make a sound for a long time. Silence suited her in a way that made people uneasy. It was not the silence of fear or stubbornness. It was the silence of absence, as if the voice had been unhooked from the soul and set aside somewhere safe. She worked without complaint, moving like careful water through the blacksmith's cramped rooms, learning the quick hot dance of tongs and hammer, the hiss that meant you were right, and the scream that meant you were wrong. She did not burn. Sparks slipped from the anvil and died on her skin. The blacksmith's wife, Risa, would watch with awe that curdled to dread. "The iron likes you," she said once, and then crossed herself as if the words were dangerous. "That isn't normal." Lyra only nodded, the gesture small, honest. She did not know what normal cost. At market they stared. Not because she was beautiful in the way stories make beauty, a flash of color, a mouth like a promise, but because everything in her felt quiet. The kind of quiet that made men rethink the last lie they told and made women listen to the tremble in their own hands. Children felt it and hiccuped, unsure whether to laugh or run. "Witch," someone whispered the first spring. "Blessing," someone else muttered, as if afraid the woods were listening. "Wrong," a third decided, because wrong is neat, and neat is easy to stack with other neat things. Lyra learned the art of walking without touching anyone. She learned to carry baskets with her elbows so her fingers would not graze another's knuckles. She learned to drop coins on a stall and step back, letting the seller pick them up. Not because she thought she might be hurt, but because she had seen how people flinched when her hand came near. But the forest didn't flinch. Every morning, before first light softened the rooflines, she went to the meadow that sloped down to the silver forest. Mist braided the grass. The trees stood with the arrogance of old kings who no longer needed crowns. It was not the birds she listened for, not the foxes moving like secrets through the hedgerow. There was a thrum beneath all of that, low as a drum heard through a wall, steady as breathing. She didn't know when she had learned it was there. She only knew that if she stood very still, heels buried in wet clay, the sound braided into the beat of her own blood. Some mornings it was far, like thunder over another valley. Some mornings it pressed right up against her chest. When it came close, it brought a name with it. Not the one the village gave her, but one with edges, a weight, a history she couldn't hold in her hands. Kale. She did not know why that name made her throat ache. She did not know why her tongue learned it first, before bread or thanks or please. She did not know why the pendant warmed when she said it. A small pulse under her skin, as if the moon itself had a heartbeat, and she was meant to keep time. She tried not to say it. She failed. Often she said it into the mist, and then clapped both hands over her mouth, horrified at the sound. at the idea that the forest might hear and answer. When nothing did, she felt relief tangled with disappointment so sharp it bled. The village had rules about dawn, though none were written down. You didn't go to the river when the fog sat on it like a woman in mourning. You didn't stare at the tree line and start sentences with "I heard." You didn't talk about the night the sky erased its stars and left only one, silver and cold, hanging too low over the forest, large enough to cast shadows. Lyra had been found the day after that night. "Don't look at the woods," Risa would scold when she caught Lyra at the door. Hair pinned in a simple knot, face washed in rainwater gone sweet with the smell of iron. They look back. Lyra would nod, because nodding was easy to forgive. It was old Mara who gave her a different kind of permission. Mara lived in a collapsing cottage that looked as if a strong sigh would push it over. She smelled of earth and mint and bones boiled into broth. She loved the world in a way that included everything ugly in it. When Lyra came, Mara dispensed tea like magic she could afford. "You don't talk because you're afraid," Mara said once, not asking. Lyra shook her head. It surprised even her. Mara's eyes, cataracted to pearl, went narrow. "Then why?" Lyra tapped her throat twice, then flattened her palm over her sternum. She did not know the words to say "my voice is not lost. It is hidden." She did not know how to explain the sense that there were syllables inside her that would change the weather if she let them out. "Ah," Mara said softly. "Stolen." She fed the fire. "Or given away." Lyra's head tilted. The question in her face was a bird. "Names, child," Mara said. "The first ones can be stolen. The last ones can only be spoken by those who love you." She blew across her tea. "And there are names you do not say unless you mean to wake the dead." Lyra's fingers tightened on the mug. It was not dead she feared. It was the living thing at the edge of the trees that was not quite man and not quite beast and far too patient. "What do you hear?" Mara asked. The room felt suddenly smaller, the roof lower, the walls bright with old herbs drying to dust. Lyra lifted one hand and let it hover over her chest. Her lips moved without sound. Then, without quite meaning to, she whispered, "Kale." The mug cracked in her other hand, a neat split from lip to base, tea bleeding down like a line drawn for a map. Mara's eyes widened, not with fear but with recognition. "Who taught you that name?" she asked very quietly. Lyra shook her head. "Then it taught you." Mara set her own cup down. "Listen to me. When the moon turns wrong, when it looks as if it has been dipped in blood and hung up wet, you bar your door. You do not answer. You do not say that name. There are wolves that carry more than teeth in their mouths." Lyra tried to make her face obedient. Inside, something edged closer to the light. It had the shape of a memory and the confidence of a promise. When she left Mara's, the day looked new in the way days look when you have agreed to a rule publicly and decided privately to break it. There are days that announce themselves and days that ask permission to exist. The day the sky changed belonged to the first kind. It began ordinary. The blacksmith tuned his hammer to the width of a horseshoe. Rissa kneaded dough and prayed with her knuckles. Lyra hauled water with a yoke and counted her steps. 30 to the well, 10 to wait if the line was merciful, 30 back. She saw her reflection in the bucket and startled, not because she was new to herself, but because a second face leaned over her shoulder in the water. Tall, blurred by ripples, its eyes like two coins in moonlight. She turned. No one. The yard slept in its own afternoon heat. A fly worried at a scab on the fence post and found glory. She stood very still until the water settled. When it did, only she looked back. By evening, clouds were stacking like dark plates. The air went sweet the way it does before a storm, as if the world were apologizing beforehand. Lyra finished her chores early, hair damp at the edges where steam had caught and clung. She told Risa, with gestures and a small smile, that she would fetch the last of the laundry before rain. Risa waved her away without looking. The meadow was a sheet of pale green. The forest beyond was not darker than usual. It was deeper. Lyra felt the thrum before she reached her usual place, felt it like the second beat in a heart, too near, too eager. She stopped at the stump where she always stood. She hooked the pendant chain between two fingers and lifted the crescent to her mouth, as if she might kiss it, as if kissing might license speech. She opened her lips. The wind hit her like language. Leaves rattled. The first big, arrogant drops of rain spattered her arms, and then the sky opened. Her dress clung, the fabric heavy, the hem a wet rope. The thrum sharpened, coming now in measured pulses. Come, come, come. The clouds tore. The moon showed wrong, too near, crimson as if it had been bruised. The village bells, silent since harvest, began to toll on their own. The sound limped across the field, stopped, struggled up again. Somewhere a horse screamed. Lyra took one step toward the trees, then another. Then another, the rain making needles of her hair again, time circling back with an ugly smile. At the edge of the wood, the air tasted like iron. A shadow moved between two trunks, massive, fluid, definite. Another shadow slid to its left. Another. The rain seemed to fall around them rather than on them, as if their bodies refused water. Her throat closed around a word she had not planned to say. It broke out anyway. Kale, she breathed. The pendant burned. Heat flared across her collarbone in a perfect half-moon and raced under her skin like quicksilver, drawing thin, bright lines along her veins. She clutched it but could not pull it away. The chain did not bite. It anchored. Her breath went shallow, the way it goes when a dream realizes you are awake and tries to hold very still so you will not notice. Something stepped into view. It was a wolf, a word too small for the animal that carried it. Tall as her shoulder, perhaps taller, fur black enough to make the night beside it look charcoal. Water slid off it like oil. Its eyes were not red, not gold. They were silver, the precise color of the pendant when moonlight hit. A color she realized she had been mistaking in her own eyes for years, naming it gray, because gray is easier to live with than silver. It stopped 3 paces away, big paws sinking into mud like seals pressed into wax. Lyra's body wanted to run but could not remember how. The wolf lowered its head, not in threat but in recognition, an acknowledgement as strange as a curtsy in a barn. Its ears flicked once. The air between them hummed. She felt the hum in her teeth. She did not know she had lifted her hand until her fingers hovered over its muzzle, rain beating on her knuckles. The wolf did not move. The forest did, trees leaning in, leaves speaking old words in a language that did not care if men remembered it. Her hand dropped. Not fear, reverence. It felt like reaching for a church door with dirty hands. The wolf's chest rose. The sound it made was not a growl. It was a note, a low tone that found the space under her breastbone and held it. A tuning fork struck clean. It trembled through the pendant, through her ribs, through the old injury she had no memory of, and the scar she did not know hid beneath her hairline. The name came with it, not spoken in any human way, not formed by lips or tongue. Lunara. She staggered. The world blinked. For a moment the forest was another forest. White trunks like pillars, a floor of moonlight, and somewhere distant, the echo of a crowd kneeling as one. Her hair was longer in that place. The pendant was a crown there, and it fit. She steadied herself by planting her feet deeper in the mud. Rain ran down her face like tears someone else had earned. She opened her mouth and closed it again, because if she spoke now, the world would forgive things it shouldn't. Behind the first wolf, others arranged themselves where shadows had been. Gray and brindle and white, a constellation that did not know stars were supposed to be far apart. They did not advance. They waited. The silver-eyed wolf looked not at her, but past her, over her shoulder, into the village, as if counting doors. Lyra turned, following that gaze. In the distance, lanterns stuttered to life, then died, then flared again. She could picture Risa at the hearth, wide hands steadying a pot that did not need steadying. She could see the blacksmith laying a hammer across his anvil like a cross. She could hear the bell miscounting the hour. A shape moved between the houses. Too tall to be man. Too much shadow to be anything else. Lyra's breath sawed. The wolf's ears pricked. The shape turned toward the meadow, and Lyra felt it feel her, the way a hawk feels the field's smallest tremor. Back, she whispered, to no one she could name. Don't come. The silver-eyed wolf flicked a glance at her, and the sense of command in that look was a hand pressed flat to her chest. Stay. Wait. Do not confuse fear with wisdom. It stepped sideways once, and where its paw left the ground, a small circle of grass flashed pale, as if frost had bloomed and died in a single breath. Lyra! The shout came from the path behind her. Old Mara, shawl over her head, skirts clotted with mud, stood with a lantern that guttered in the damp. Her face pulled into fear and scold, both old friends to a woman who had seen too much. "Don't you answer it," Mara cried, voice breaking. "Don't you dare!" Lyra swallowed. The name pressed up under her tongue like a rising tide. She put both hands over her mouth, as if she could hold it in, as if human hands were enough to bar a door made by gods. The silver-eyed wolf's head turned toward Mara. Not a threat. An acknowledgement, "I know you." Mara's lamp flared and blew out, smoke scribbling on rain. The dark wrapped them closer. "Come to me, child," Mara said, voice low now, fierce with the kind of love that worries you like a loose tooth. "Come away." Lyra took a step back toward her. The pendant pulsed, once hard. The wolves lifted their heads in a ripple, a wave of attention, and out in the village, something howled. Not wolf, not human, a wound given a voice. The silver-eyed wolf looked up, past Lyra, past Mara, into the wrong moon. When it looked back, the world seemed to narrow until only two living things remained in it. Lyra, and the creature that had a king's patience. It lowered its head and for the first time bowed. The gesture cleaved her open. It was not to a mortal that kings bowed. It was not to a foundling or a blacksmith's helper. It was to a name. To Lunara, Lyra shook. She wanted to run into the dark and never stop. She wanted to step forward and lay her hand between the wolf's ears and say the word in her that would unmake winter. She wanted to go back to the smithy and scrub pots until the skin came off her knuckles so she could believe she had been good. The choice did not belong to her. From the edge of the village, torches bloomed, a line of clumsy stars weaving toward the meadow. Men shouted. Someone dragged a cart forward to serve as a barricade. Dogs, good honest farm dogs, screeched and went silent, tails clamped. The blacksmith's thin bell of a wife, Rissa, called Lyra's name, and the sound broke on the rain. Mara pushed past Lyra, interposing herself between girl and wolves with the terrible courage of the old. "Go," she barked at the forest as if it obeyed commands. "Not tonight!" The wolves did not move. The silver-eyed one blinked once, slow, rain hanging from his lashes. Then delicately, as if unrolling a map, he stepped forward and set one paw on the meadow's border, the invisible line that belonged to men. "No," Mara whispered. To the wolf. To Lyra. To the sky that had changed color and refused to change back. Lyra had the sudden, sharp memory of snow falling like ash. A great hall without walls, voices chanting not words but intentions. A man walking toward her with a crown he did not want, and a vow he did not know would take his life and give it back unasked. His eyes had been silver then, too. He had said one word, not her name, but the promise under it. Mine. The torches came close enough that she could see who held them. Farmers in wet wool, boys who had learned fear from their fathers. The blacksmith, jaw set, hammer in hand, and at their front, a man whose fine cloak had seen better roads. The constable, sent from the market town the previous autumn to keep the forest from walking into their beds. "Back from the line," he called, voice hard. Back by the king's law. The wolves did not know his king. They knew another. The constable turned his head, caught Lyra's shape at the field's edge, and scowled as if he had found a child behind a tent where soldiers drank. "You," he snapped. "Get behind the men. Don't show your fear." Lyra did not move. Fear was not the thing standing upright under her skin. The silver-eyed wolf, closer now, the rain making his fur sleek. The cords of muscle in his shoulders working like ropes. Lifted his gaze past the torches and pinned Lyra again with a look that remembered her. In the same heartbeat, the sound rose, not from his throat, not from the pack, but from the world itself, a chord struck underneath reality, thrumming through the roots and into the soles of her feet. Her pendant answered, bright as a struck coin. Lyra's voice, the one that had not belonged to the village, pushed up hard, begging to be used. Mara grabbed her wrist. "Do not say it," she hissed. "If you say it, he will answer, and if he answers—" "There is no door anyone can close." The constable took another step forward. Torch lifted, as if fire meant anything to creatures who carried the night in their mouths. "Back to the woods," he shouted. "Back!" The silver-eyed wolf did not back. He spoke, not in human syllables, not in growls, but in the iron-soft language Lyra had been feeling since before she had a name. The sound wrapped her. It did not ask. It called. Something inside her unclasped. Lyra tore her hand from Mara's grip. She took 2 steps forward. Not to the wolf, not to the constable, but to the line itself, the place where one world ended and another began. She sank to her knees in the mud without meaning to, as if it were right to lower herself at a threshold. Her hair came loose in the rain, dark rope over her shoulder. The pendant burned. She put her palm flat to the ground. The meadow answered. Light, thin as a thread, silver as breath on glass, ran from her hand in a small, quick vein, racing toward the forest, finding the wolf's paws, climbing up into him the way water climbs roots. His eyes flared. The pack shuddered in a silent wave, heads lowering, bodies sinking, not in fear, but in allegiance. The men saw only light and fell back. One dropped his torch. It went out in the muck. The constable swore an oath not learned in church. The blacksmith lifted his hammer and let it fall without swinging. Rissa whispered Lyra's name like a sin. "Child," Mara begged, on her knees now too. "Look at me." Lyra lifted her head. For the first time, Mara saw silver burning in the girl's eyes. Not reflected, not borrowed, but born. The sight broke something old in Mara and made something older kneel. "What are you?" the constable demanded, stepping closer because men do not like not knowing what to hit. "Girl, get aside." Lyra stood. Her knees shook. The pendant dimmed to a steady glow. She looked at the constable because he had asked a question, and questions asked in good faith deserve answers, even when they should not be given. Her mouth opened. It was a small sound that came out first. The sound of a lock that has not been turned in years, making its first brave click. The syllable scraped. Another click. The name that lived under her tongue rolled forward like a tide. The wolves leaned. The constable did not know what he was bracing for, only that he should have braced sooner. Mara shook her head, tears and rain making a single river of her face. Lyra's voice found itself. Lunara. The wrong moon brightened, as if pleased to be seen for what it was. The forest inhaled. The wolves bowed their heads as one. Out beyond the last cottage, a shape like a man stepped fully into the world, the distance between him and Lyra collapsing as if gravity had remembered an old agreement. The constable took a step back that he would deny later. "Archers!" he shouted, though there were none. "Arch!" A howl broke the last of his command, a sound not savage but sovereign, cutting the air into pieces that fell like glass. The silver-eyed wolf lifted his muzzle and finished the note, and when it ended, the village belonged to whatever name had been spoken. Lyra swayed. The ground pressed up to meet her in a slow, soft tilt, and she would have gone down if Mara's hands hadn't been there with the reflex of a life spent catching falling things. The pendant cooled. Her mouth tasted of iron. She looked at the wolf and saw not a beast but a door. Not to the forest. To herself. "Don't take her," Mara whispered into the rain, not sure who she addressed. The shape coming from the village stopped at the far edge of the meadow, where torchlight gave up and moonlight took the work. He stood taller than any man there, shoulders squared in a weary kind of grace, hair dark and heavy in the wet, a crown on his brow that was not metal, not jewel, but light, the kind of light you feel on your skin before you see it. His eyes were silver, not like coins now, but like currents, moving, alive, dangerous because they carried everything. Lyra's breath vanished and then returned as if he had allowed it. He did not speak at first. He only looked, and in that look there were winters that had not ended and vows that had. He took one step onto the meadow. The wolves parted without a sound. The constable raised his torch like a shield, and discovered fire is smaller than a king. The man, or the thing that wore a man's shape like a courtesy, came within 3 paces and stopped. Rain threaded the space between them. He looked at Lyra's face, then at her pendant, and then he did what the wolf had done. He bowed. Not deep. Not theatrical. A small, precise inclination. The exact angle of a man who had bowed before no one and had decided to remember how. When he straightened, his voice crossed the rain as if rain were nothing. It was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried both command and apology in a ratio that made men forgive themselves for obeying. "Forgive the years," he said, and the words were for her alone. "I was late." Lyra's hands trembled. She did not know why her eyes burned. She did not know why his voice fit in her ribs, why it finished a sentence she had been writing in silence for 5 winters. She did not know why she felt both safer and closer to danger than she had ever been. The constable found his courage in the only place some men keep it, behind a weapon. He thrust the torch toward the newcomer, as if fire could erase a history. "Name yourself," he demanded. "By the king's law." The newcomer turned his head, not quite far enough to make the man feel noticed. When he looked back at Lyra, he spoke her name the way a door speaks its hinge. "Lunara." Then, almost gently, as if the syllables might bruise, he added the word that had once built an empire and broken it. "Mine." Lyra's knees went soft. The meadow's light sprang again from under her palm, though she had not lifted it. The wolves exhaled with the relief of something finally happening. Mara made a sound that might have been prayer, might have been a curse. Rissa sobbed into her apron. "What are you?" the constable asked the stranger. Torch shaking now, the flame guttering in rain. The stranger lifted his eyes. If a storm had eyes, they would look like that. He did not answer the constable's question. He answered Lyra's, the one she had been asking the mist every dawn. "I am Kyle," he said. "Alpha of the Silver Fang, king, until you tell me I am not." The name hit her. Not as a blow, not as comfort, but as recognition. The way a mirror hits you the first time you see the person you are going to become. The pendant burned once, then settled. Warm. Steady, yes. Kale took one more step. Close now. Close enough that she could see the thin, pale scar under his left eye. A mark the rain could not erase. He looked past her for a heartbeat. To the village, to the men, to the small life she had borrowed and done her best to carry well. And then back, as if choosing. "Lunara," he said again, softer, a man hushing a storm. "You lived among mortals in silence. I will not take your voice from you to give it back. You will come, because you choose." The constable lunged with the torch because small men hate choices that are not theirs. Kale's hand moved lazily, just a turn of the wrist, and the torch went out, smoke making a line on the rain like ink in water. No one cheered. No one breathed. Lyra felt the world pitch. You don't choose in moments like this. You remember the choice you already made, the one your blood signed without you. The meadow waited. The forest watched. The wrong moon lowered its face until it filled the sky. She could go back to the smithy, to warm bread and honest work, to the safety of smallness. She could kneel in church on Sunday and say words that had never hurt anyone, and had never saved anyone either. She could be Lyra, quiet, careful, grateful, or she could be Lunara and admit that the silence had not been empty. It had been kept. Her mouth shaped a word. Mara shook her head, tears fierce. Kale did not move, as if his stillness could protect her from his wanting. Lyra lifted her chin. The rain tasted clean. Her voice, hers, rose without breaking. "Take me to the place where my name was first spoken," she said, "and I will decide what to be." Kale's eyes closed, just for a beat, as if a wound had been bound. When he opened them, the silver in them softened to something like light on a river at evening. "As you command," he said. He turned, not his back but his body, an invitation rather than a dismissal. The wolves parted again, making a path that led into the silver forest, where the trees stood like cathedral columns and the air smelled like remembrance. Lyra took one step and then another, leaving prints that filled with pale light before the rain washed them away. Mara caught her sleeve and then let it go, because love that keeps you small is not love that keeps you safe. "Child," Mara whispered. voice breaking. "If you see the Moon Palace, don't look directly at the throne." Lyra nodded, though she did not understand. She did not ask why. She understood later, is a word some questions require. Cale slowed until they walked side by side, close but not touching, as if his restraint were a gift and not a cage. He glanced down once, the kind of glance that weighs what it cannot afford to lose. Behind them, the constable found his voice and threw it after them like a stone. "By the king's law?" he began. Cale paused and looked back over his shoulder. And the law remembered that there are kings who do not ask permission to be obeyed. The constable shut his mouth on the rest of the sentence and would not open it, again until morning. Risa stood in the rain and watched. The girl she had fed and scolded and folded into bedsheets, like a daughter walk into a story bigger than the village could bear. She pressed her hands together and prayed to a god who had never answered quickly. The forest accepted Lyra the way the sea accepts a returning tide. The wolves moved around them in a rhythm inhuman and comforting, flanking her with the old logic of guardians. Mist rose, laced with silver. Somewhere far ahead, bells she had never heard began to ring, deep, sweet, and wrong in the way of holy things that do not care if men call them holy. At the border where meadow gave up and trees began, Cale stopped and turned toward her fully. Rain fell between them, fine now. Like thread, he leaned, not closer but inward, as if into a truth, and in a voice made for oaths and bedside whispers, he spoke her real name again, not to own, not to claim, but to wake. Lunara. The forest opened, and the chapter, like a held breath, finally exhaled. Cut to black, beat. Chapter 2. The Night of Crimson Moons. The forest had been waiting. For years it whispered her name beneath its breath, letting vines twist in anticipation, letting its rivers remember the shape of her reflection. Now, as Lyra, no, Lunara, stepped beyond the meadow's edge beside the Alpha King, the waiting ended. Branches arched overhead like ribs. Mist thickened until the moonlight itself seemed to drown. Each step she took scattered sparks of pale silver that sank into the soil and vanished, as if the earth were drinking her. Cale did not speak. His wolves flanked them in silence, eyes gleaming with the faint light of loyalty. He moved through the trees with a confidence that belonged to something born of this place, not merely ruling it. "Where are you taking me?" she asked at last, her voice unsteady, new to itself. He glanced sideways. "Home, or what's left of it." The tremor beneath the roots, the air changed first. A low vibration, so deep it lived in the bones of the forest, rippled through every trunk and leaf. The wolves halted. Cale's head lifted, his pupils narrowing into thin rings of molten silver. "The moons are aligning," he murmured. "Too soon." Before Lyra could ask, the ground beneath them shuddered. Birds tore out of the canopy in a frenzy of wings. Trees groaned. The scent of lightning spread through the damp air. Kyle turned toward her, toward the crescent pendant still glowing against her throat. "Whatever you do," he said, "don't run. The forest remembers who you are. If you flee, it will remember faster." Then came the sound, a roar that was not thunder, not wind, not any mortal thing. It rolled across the land in waves, snapping branches, shaking moss from stone. The wolves answered instinctively, howling as one choir of defiance. Their voices rose against the storm until the forest itself seemed to listen. Lyra's knees went weak. Her vision blurred at the edges. Somewhere inside the trembling earth, something ancient was waking, something that recognized her heartbeat. The eclipse above them. The moon began to die. Its light faded to gray, then ember, then the deep, slow crimson of blood through water. Clouds spiraled, caught in invisible hands. The air thickened until each breath felt like swallowing glass. Cale stared upward, his jaw clenched. "It's begun. What is?" she asked. "The crimson eclipse. It shouldn't come for another century." He looked at her again, as if she were the answer and the question both. "Your awakening moved it." Lyra shook her head. "I didn't do anything. You existed," he said softly. That was enough. The sky pulsed. For an instant, every leaf turned red. The light painted Kyle's armor in liquid fire. The wolves flattened their ears and growled low. Then the first tear opened in the sky. The descent it looked like lightning but slower, burning through the clouds with deliberate hunger. From within that scar, shadows spilled, thick and twisting. They hit the ground in silence, forming shapes that began to move. Wolves, hundreds of them, yet not like Kale's. These were taller, gaunter, their fur threaded with smoke, their eyes empty hollows of red. They did not belong to this forest. They did not belong anywhere. Kale's voice was cold. Shadowborn. Lyra backed against a tree. What do they want? You, he said simply. The first of the beasts lunged. Kale was faster. His blade, black steel edged with silver light, cut through the air in a blur. The creature dissolved into mist with a scream that curdled the air. Stay behind me, he barked, but one shadow broke through the ring of wolves and came for her, silent, almost graceful. Its claws caught her arm before Kale could intercept. The pain was cold, not sharp, as though the wound had been made of winter itself. Lyra cried out, clutching the scratch. Silver fire raced beneath her skin, chasing the darkness. Her vision snapped white, then silver, then into a world of sound and pulse she had never felt before. She could hear the forest breathe. She could feel Kyle's heartbeat. She could see through the eyes of every wolf within reach. The awakening, her scream turned to light. Silver burst outward in a wave, throwing the Shadowborn back. Trees bowed beneath it. Kale shielded his eyes. The wolves around them yelped once, then stood straighter, renewed by whatever force had passed through their veins. When the glow faded, Lyra stood trembling, her wound gone. Her eyes, no longer gray, were burning mercury. Kale approached slowly, his sword lowered. Lunara. She looked at her hands. They shimmered faintly, as if the blood beneath her skin had learned how to shine. What's happening to me? The truth, he said. You're remembering what you were. Echoes of the past visions struck her. So fast, so vivid, she gasped. A temple of white stone under a sky split by 2 moons. A throne of mirrors, her own voice echoing in a chorus of prayer. A man, Kyle, younger, bloodied, kneeling at her feet, swearing a vow he didn't understand. Then fire, screams, silence. She stumbled back, pressing her palms to her temples. Stop it, please, make it stop. Kale caught her shoulders, steadying her. Breathe. They're only memories. They're not mine. They were, he said, before you chose to live among mortals. Her gaze met his, wild, furious, terrified. Why can't I remember choosing anything? Because the gods buried the moment you did. The call across worlds, the ground convulsed again. The rift above widened, spilling more shadows. Kale's wolves formed a defensive ring around them, snarling as the dark tide advanced. Kale's voice dropped to a growl. We can't hold them all. You have to close the gate. Lyra shook her head. I don't know how. You will, he said, gripping her hand and pressing it to his chest. You always did. The contact jolted her, his heartbeat thundering against her palm, strong and relentless. Through that rhythm, she felt something else, vast and distant, a pull that stretched across stars, through time itself. In another realm, a place of silver dust and endless dark, something heard her. A power older than memory stirred. Kale flinched as light bled from her touch, threading into his veins. Lunara, listen to me. Control it. Don't let it consume. Too late. The energy flared, silver and red colliding, turning the forest into a storm of color. The Shadowborn disintegrated by the dozens, their screams scattering into wind. The rift trembled, shrinking, yet every pulse drew more from her. Her knees buckled. Kale caught her as she fell, pulling her close. Her breath hitched. Her skin burned with light. If you keep going, you'll die, he shouted. She smiled faintly, eyes half-lidded. Then the gate will close. He gritted his teeth, shaking his head. Not again. He pressed his forehead against hers, his voice breaking into something she had never heard from him before. A plea. Lunara, enough. The name hit her heart like a bell. The light fractured, slowed, then folded back into her chest. Silence fell. Aftermath, the rift sealed. The crimson hue bled from the moon until only pale silver remained. The Shadowborn were gone, leaving the stench of burnt frost. Rain began to fall, thin, cold, merciful. Kale still held her. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath his fingers. She whispered, "You felt me before tonight, didn't you?" His jaw tightened. Every time the wind touched the forest. Every time the moon waned. But I thought it was a memory refusing to die. He looked down at her, eyes softer now, stripped of command. "Now I know it was you." The choice. They rested beneath the ruined boughs until dawn stained the horizon. Lyra stirred, wincing. "If I'm this Lunara, why can't I control it?" "Because you lived too long pretending to be mortal," he said quietly. "Power forgets the hand that shaped it." She watched the rising sun filter through fog. "And if I remember completely?" Kale hesitated. "Then the gods will too." Her breath caught. "And they'll come for me?" "They'll come for both of us." Silence stretched between them, soft, dangerous, full of things neither dared say. Then faintly, from the distant village, came the toll of a single bell. It sounded wrong, offbeat, like a warning. Kale rose, scanning the horizon. The mortals saw the crimson moon. "They'll call it a curse." Lyra followed his gaze. "They'll come looking for the girl who caused it." "Then we leave before they find her," he said, helping her to her feet. "The Moon Palace isn't safe anymore, but there are sanctuaries still loyal to your name." She glanced toward the forest path that led home. "And if I don't want to run?" He looked at her, truly looked, and something unguarded flickered through the hardness of his face. "Then I stay." The whisper as they began walking. The forest exhaled around them, trees bending as though bowing farewell. Yet beneath the calm, another sound threaded through the wind, faint, echoing, impossible. A whisper. "Lunara." "Come home," Lyra froze. "Did you hear that?" Kale's expression darkened. "It's not the forest this time." The whisper came again, clearer, female, melodic. "You were never meant to walk beside him." Lyra's hand flew to her pendant. It glowed again, this time with a dim red shimmer. A tear slid down her cheek unbidden. That voice. "I know it." Kale's grip tightened on his sword. "Who?" Her lips trembled. "My mother." The forest groaned, wind whipping through branches like a hiss of anger. The crimson tint flickered briefly over the moon again before fading. Kale turned her toward him. "She's dead, Lunara. You buried her yourself." Lyra shook her head slowly, eyes distant. "Then who's still calling me?" The answer came not in words but in howl. Low, mournful, echoing through every corner of the forest. Kale's eyes widened. "That's not one of mine." From the shadows beyond the ridge, another figure emerged. Human shape, silver eyes, the mirror of Kale himself. His cloak shimmered like night turned liquid. When he smiled, the world seemed colder. "Brother," the stranger said, "it seems your lost goddess remembers me too." Kyle drew his blade, stepping forward. "Lucian." The name dropped like a curse. Lyra stared between them, the world tilting again, heart pounding with recognition she did not want to claim. The pendant blazed once more, caught between silver and crimson. Kyle's command cut through the air. "Run. Lunara, now." The sky answered with thunder, the crimson moon flickering alive once more. And the forest roared as if all of creation had remembered her name. Chapter 3. The Alpha King's Hunt. There are two kinds of hunts. The one you begin, and the one that began before you were born. For Kale Draven, Alpha of the Silver Fang, the hunt for Lunara had always been the second kind. It began in the first winter he wore a crown he never wanted, with a wound that would not close and a vow that would not sleep. It began the night the Moon Palace burned, when the gods sealed a goddess into silence and smuggled her into the world of men like contraband hope. And it began again now, with the forest breathing hard, with the sky flickering between silver and blood, with Lucian stepping out of shadow wearing their mother's smile like a stolen ring. Kale placed himself between Lunara and his brother. The pack shifted behind him in a tight crescent, a living shield. Fur bristled. Claws bit earth, rain caught in their coats like stars. "Do not run," Kyle said without turning. His voice wasn't loud. It carried anyway. Not from him. Lunara stood at his shoulder, pendant burning against her throat, eyes bright enough to hurt. The forest wind tugged at her hair as if trying to pull her back into old stories. She did not move. Lucien tipped his head, amused. You always did prefer straight lines, brother. I prefer circles. Look how lovely this one is. Our first queen, our last god, and the two of us to divide the world between. Step away from her, Kyle replied. Or what? Lucian's silver eyes smiled. You'll finish what you started? We both know you couldn't do it then. You certainly can't do it now that she looks at you as if you've saved her life. Lunara's breath hitched. Kale heard it, knew its weight, filed it next to the other debts he would one day repay with blood. He let the point of his sword fall a fraction. It was not surrender. It was mercy choosing its angle. You are trespassing, Kyle said, and you are outnumbered. Am I? Lucien spread one hand. Red mist leaked along his knuckles and evaporated into rain. The eclipse loved me, brother. It kissed my mouth and called me son. Your forest may bend to you, but the sky has better taste. The wrong moon trembled, as if flattered. Behind Kale, a low growl passed through the pack like a ripple of iron. It was not fear, it was promise. Lucian's gaze slid to Lunara and lingered, hungry and oddly gentle. And you look so small in that skin. Does it hurt, waking, or is it like drowning? I've often wondered. Lunara did not lower her eyes. I don't remember you. He made a small theatrical wound of his mouth. You will. I am the prayer your priests would not say aloud. Kale moved. Lucien moved the same breath. The air between them shuddered as two histories collided in a single step. Steel hissed. Claw and blade sang. Rain stuttered around their speed, falling in torn curtains. The brothers met, parted, met again, a rhythm they had learned before speech. Kale's style was clean, spare, made of decisions he had paid for. Lucian's was beautiful in the way a serpent is beautiful, economy masquerading as grace until it opens its mouth. The first blood was silver. It fell from Kyle's cheek in a single, elegant line, and where it touched the ground the grass flashed bright. The wolves pressed forward, almost breaking formation, half mad with the scent. Kale lifted one hand without looking back, and they fell still at once, muzzles quivering, bodies shaking with the effort to obey. Lucien laughed. Good dogs. Family, Kyle said, not looking at him, was the first thing you forgot how to speak to. The throne reminded me, Lucien replied sweetly. Every night, and every night I practiced saying its name instead. He cut, quick, for Kale's jaw. Kale parried, turned, let the strike slide. He did not aim for Lucian's face. He never had. Old habit, old mercy, old mistake. The forest watched, the trees leaning in, the ferns trembling with passing wind. Somewhere far, a raven called once and then thought better of it. Lunara stood and memorized the way the brothers moved. Not as foes. As reflections, bent in different mirrors. The pendant throbbed against her breastbone, each pulse a question. She answered with breath and stillness, trying to hold her power as you hold a child who's woken from a bad dream, firm enough to keep it from breaking itself, gentle enough to keep it from breaking you. Do not look at the throne, old Mara had warned, but Lucian's pupils were twin crowns. Kale feinted left, pivoted, and drove for the gap beneath Lucian's ribs. The single place Lucien always left open, the single place Kale had always spared. His blade kissed air. Lucien was already behind him, speaking into his ear like a brother praying untruths. You think you're hunting her back, but you're only hunting yourself. Kale didn't waste breath answering. He moved through Lucian's shadow and cut it in half. It stitched itself back together, sulking. The wolves shifted again, could smell the moment the dance would turn ugly, could taste the second the moon would choose sides. They tensed to spring. Hold, Kyle commanded without turning his head. The pack held. He stepped forward once, point low, shoulders loose, pulse steady. You have had your look, he said to Lucien. Go back to the hole you dragged your name through. Lucian's smile thinned. Careful, you're starting to sound like a king. I sound like a brother. And I sound like a man done waiting, Lucian said. And for the first time, something real and wounded moved beneath his charm. The gods took her voice and left me the silence. Do you know what I did with it, Kale? I filled it with your name until there was room for nothing else. He lifted his hand. The air went cold and red. Shadow peeled away from trees and became wolves. Not formed as the ones from the rift, but crafted, careful, shaped around bones that weren't there. They lined the ridge, shoulder to shoulder, a second pack with no breath and no heartbeat. Kale's wolves didn't snarl. Snarling would have given the dead too much credit. Lunara tasted winter. It threaded through her teeth and settled at the back of her tongue. Her hands sparked silver. She swallowed the light and it obeyed because it wanted to live. Lucian's gaze flicked back to her. See? She remembers how to hold the world. Do you remember, Lunara, how you broke it to save him? The words struck something sleeping beneath her ribs. It opened one eye and remembered fire. Kale moved a fraction, the line of his body intercepting sight, sound, intention. You will not use her memory as a weapon, he said. I would rather forget my own name than watch you try. Lucian chuckled. You might get your wish. He snapped his fingers. The dead pack leapt. Kyle's command cracked through the air. Hold. Then it was too late to hold anything but the ground, the hunt, that started before. Later, the bards would say the forest howled that night, but they would be wrong. It sang. Battle made music. Loyalty made rhythm. A hymn that bled without begging. Kyle cut through shadow with light the color of iron left in moonbeams. Wolves met wolves, and the clash of them sounded like surf. Lunara moved as Kyle had told her, behind him, but not hiding, hands open, palms forward. The silver under her skin braided into thin strands that crisscrossed the air and stitched holes Lucian tore. She did not throw power. She wove it. The dead tried to eat the pattern she made. They failed. Even teeth cannot digest a promise. Lucian watched her work with a fascination that made Kale cold. She always liked mending better than killing, he said. A soft heart makes a hard goddess. Kale didn't dignify it with reply. He drove a shoulder into Lucian's chest, broke through his guard, and answered with steel. Lucian vanished, reappeared to Kale's left, and nicked his wrist, because that was the wrist that had held a crown out to a dying palace. Tell her why you hunted her, he murmured. Tell her why you let them bury her in a mortal name. I did not let, Kale began, then stopped, because gods punish men who explain their love in the middle of a war. Lunara turned toward him anyway, as if the unfinished sentence were a rope threaded through her. Why? Kale parried, pivoted, stepped into a shadow that wasn't there, and made it be there by looking at it. Because to save you, I had to lose you. The words landed in her like rain on hot stone. Shock, steam, a sound you don't forget. What did you do? Later, he said. There may not be one, she shot back, and power flashed around her like a warning. He met Lucian's blade and forced him back 2 paces, teeth set. There will be one. He believed it so hard the forest believed it too. But belief is not the same thing as safety. A dead wolf got past the line. Just one. Just enough. It reached Lunara with that silent grace, mouth open, red fog in its throat. She did not step away. She set her hand against its muzzle like a blessing or a command. It was both, and spoke, low, in a language only Roots remembered. Sleep. The wolf folded. The fog seeped out of it and turned back into the idea of cold. The body became sap and soil and usefulness, Lucian hissed. She remembers. Enough, Kale agreed, not taking his eyes off his brother. Enough to end you here. Lucian smiled, sad and spoiled. You are the only thing I have ever wanted to survive. Then he dropped the smile and the world with it. He cut. Not Kale, not Lunara, not any body. He cut the hunt itself, the thread that had drawn Kale across years, across worlds, across an entire life. Kale felt it snap. For a heartbeat, the forest went soundless. For a heartbeat, Kale forgot where he had been going his entire life. He took one step the wrong way. Lucian slid in with the ease of long practice. The blade meant for Cale's heart met Cale's palm. Blood burst star-bright. He turned the weapon, accepted the wound, and used the new angle to drive his hilt into Lucian's ribs. Bone cracked. Lucian grunted, not surprise, just annoyance that pain still bothered him, and fell back 3 steps, weight light, balance arrogant. Cale bled. His wolves tasted it again and held anyway because he had asked. Lunara moved to his side without asking permission, the way weather moves to a mountain. She took his cut wrist in both hands. The silver beneath her skin rose, met his blood, braided. The wound closed with a sound like a kiss. Kyle swore softly. Not at the injury, at the intimacy. Don't thank me, she said, shaky and fierce. I know better, he said, a fraction of a smile. A fraction of a life he had not allowed himself to want. Then tell me, she pressed, eyes roving his face. You hunted me because you told me to, he said, and the simple truth of it made Lucian's face flinch. On the last night, in the palace, when the gods opened their hands and asked us what we would keep, Lunara staggered as memory struck. White stone, red silk, a throne made of mirrors, her own voice echoing through the hall. If I forget, will you find me? Kyle, kneeling, eyes drowning in silver. Across lifetimes, across worlds, across names, he had promised. I will hunt you home. Her knees loosened. Kale's hand found her elbow, anchored her back into the moment like a vow hammered into iron. Lucian's smile returned, thinner now, exhausted at its edges. Romance, he said, tongue rolling the word like a relic. How dear, how expensive. He lifted both arms. The dead pack dissolved back into fog. The fog rose and clung to the canopy like aching breath. When it fell again, it fell as snow. Out of season, onto spring grass, smothering green with white that was not cold, white that smelled like old altars. Lunara shivered. Not from chill, from recognition. Enough, Cale said, voice low and certain. Leave this wood. I will, Lucian said. With her. Cale went still. Lunara's head snapped toward Lucian, and for a flicker of a heartbeat there was something like pity in her face. Why do you want me? Lucian's answer was simple and obscene. Because the gods want you, and I want what they want, so they will want what I want. You always did prefer borrowed desire, Cale said. Lucian's eyes warmed as if Cale had praised him. And you prefer original sin. He bowed to Lunara, ridiculous and precise. My lady, come away from the dog who thinks he's a man. Return to the altar that gave you a voice worth stealing. Lunara stepped forward once, not toward him, not toward Cale, but toward the space between them where the old story lived. She lifted her chin. The pendant glowed white now, silver burned clean. I'm not your altar, she said, and I'm not your war. Lucian's lashes lowered. Then be our crown. She already is, Kyle said. They moved at the same moment, Cale for Lucian's heart, Lucien for Lunara's throat. The wolves broke formation, a simultaneous convulsion. Love made muscle. The forest groaned, a cathedral shifting on its foundations. Power leaped out of Lunara in a net, fine, bright, woven on a loom only she could see, and caught both brothers inches from their marks. They hung there, breathing hard, faces inches apart, blades an inch from skin. Stop, she said, not loud. Absolute. The net tightened. Cale's shoulders shook once with the effort of not finishing what his body had already decided to do. Lucian grinned into the restraint like a child testing a new toy. She looked at them both and saw the same boy written 2 ways, one in duty, one in hunger. She wanted to take both faces in her hands and tell the truth no priest had let her say. You are both beloved, and that has never been the same thing as you are both right. Listen, she said, the silver in her eyes softening to something that didn't hurt to look at. The eclipse is over. The gate is shut. The forest is ours for one breath. We can spend it killing each other, or we can use it to choose. Lucien's gaze flicked down to the net. And you choose? She exhaled. For a moment she was not Lyra, not Lunara, not goddess, not mortal, She was a woman who had slept in a forge and woken on a throne and understood both beds too well. "I choose to know why you want me," she said. "Not the gods. You. Say it in a language that bleeds." Something fragile and furious passed over Lucian's face like weather breaking over a field. He swallowed. When he spoke, the charm thinned enough to show bone. "Because when you were ours, our kingdom had seasons," he said simply. "And when you left, it only had winter." The net loosened a fraction. Cale could have struck. He didn't. He closed his eyes and accepted the pain of recognizing the same truth in his brother's mouth. Lunara's throat worked. "And you, Cale? Why do you hunt me? Not the vow. Not the throne. You." He opened his eyes. A man made of oath stood there, and behind him, for a heartbeat, the boy who had knelt in a hall of mirrors. "Because I am worse without you," he said. "And the world is too." The forest made a sound like approval and pity braided together. She let them go. They did not strike. Both brothers stepped back the same small distance, as if choreographed by grief. The pack reformed around Cale. The fog wolves, what remained of them, shuddered and turned their faces away, ashamed of being made of the wrong kind of moon. Lucian shook his shoulders free of memory. "How priestly you both sound," he said lightly, as if the last 30 heartbeats had not nearly remade him. "Very well, a choice. Here is mine." He pointed lazily to the trees behind Lunara. A lantern flickered there. Old Mara, bent and bright, stood in the wet ferns, breath hard, eyes wide with the kind of courage that only old women and very young saints command. "Child?" she called, voice shaking. "Don't look at the—" Lucian flicked 2 fingers. The lantern died. Mara gasped and clutched her chest. Shadow tightened around her throat like a necklace that wished it were a noose. Lunara moved, but Cale moved faster. He was on Lucian with a snarl that wasn't a sound so much as a sentence. "You do not touch what kneels in my forest." He drove his brother into a trunk hard enough to shake birds out of it. "Release her," Kyle said. Lucian's smile returned, brittle with delight. "Say please." Lunara lifted a palm. The net flashed. The shadow slid off Mara's throat like a stain rinsed out by grief. Mara collapsed to her knees, coughing, one hand raised in thanks that didn't care who it was for. Lucian's mouth turned down. "Tiresome." "You don't get to use my people as punctuation," Kyle said. "Then stop pausing," Lucian replied. He vanished. Snow fell upward. The wrong moon blinked and pretended innocence. Silence rang. Cale swayed once, then caught himself. He didn't lower his blade. He listened the way a man listens for the last word of an argument he has already lost. The pack spread out, noses up, bodies low. They formed a moving circle around Lunara and Cale, a dance learned long before fear and improved by it. Old Mara crawled through fern and wet leaf until she reached Lunara's hem. She pressed her forehead to the girl's knuckles. "What did I tell you, child?" Lunara's laugh was half a sob. "Not to look at the throne." "Good," Mara rasped. "Then now's the time not to." Cale kept his eyes on the trees. "He's not gone. He never leaves. He only changes the room. Where will he go?" Lunara asked. "Not where," Cale said. "When?" The word made the forest lean away as if from a flame it remembered too well. Lunara's skin prickled. He can," Cale said. "And he will. He'll hunt backward through the last 5 winters. He'll visit every hour like a thief testing windows. He'll look for where you were thinnest. If he finds a seam, he'll pull it until everything you built as Lyra unravels." Her breath left her. Images flickered. Rissa's soft hands, the blacksmith's tired laugh, the bucket in which a second face had almost appeared, a village learning to fear her less because she feared herself more, the morning she tied her hair with thread, the evening she wiped iron dust from her cheeks with the heel of her hand and felt almost human. "I won't let him," Cale said. "You can't watch every day," she whispered. "I can try," he said. And the simplicity of it nearly hurt. "Then we hunt him," she said. And when she lifted her face, it was not a goddess who spoke, but a woman who had been stolen from herself and meant to steal back a life. Cale hesitated. The hesitation did not belong to fear. It belonged to strategy. We have to divide the ground. The mortal days you lived are a map. He'll choose the routes that hurt most. We'll choose them first. How? Mara croaked, pushing herself upright. You can't be in two places at once. Cale's mouth tightened. No, but the hunt can. He turned, raising two fingers like a conductor. The pack split as if a river had remembered two banks. Wolves moved out in pairs, trios, quads, swift and silent, each taking a direction that corresponded not to compass but to memories. You're sending them into time? Mara demanded, scandalized and impressed in equal measure. Into scent, Kyle said. Time follows scent better than men follow kings. Lunara closed her eyes. The silver in her veins breathed outward. She let it thread along the forest paths she had walked as Lyra, to the well, to the forge, to the meadow where she said a name she did not understand and scared the birds who loved her anyway. The memory paths lit pale. The pack bent their paws to them. Cal, she said, eyes still closed. If he finds the moment I almost spoke, if he stops me, I'll speak it for you, Cale said. She opened her eyes. You can't say my name. I can say mine, he said, and you will remember why you asked me to hunt. Something unclenched inside her chest. The kind of knot you forget you're carrying until it eases and leaves you both, lighter and terrified by how light you were meant to be. Then take me to the first place he will go, she said. Cale looked, toward the ridge where the village sat, small and stubborn against rain. He will start where you learned to pretend you were safe. Lunra nodded once. The river. The reeds, Mara added, voice grim. Where the world met her and decided not to be kind. Cale offered his hand. She took it. They ran. The river that named. The forest made room for them. The way grief makes room for anger, so that both can breathe, and neither can kill you outright. Branches lifted. Roots softened. The pack flowed ahead in sleek scouts and behind in solid phalanx. Between their bodies, Lunara saw flickers of her. A girl in a horse blanket, the color of sky under ice, a crescent pendant hot against a throat too cold. Cale didn't look back. He trusted she was there because the world was louder when she was. When we reach the river, he said, breath even though they were moving fast. Do not step into the water. He'll try to drown you in the moment before your name. I didn't have one, she said. You did, he replied. You just couldn't say it. They broke from the trees, and the reeds rose up like a crowd trying to see the miracle. The river ran black-silver under the late sky, slick as a blade. Rain freckled it. Fog lay low to the surface, a blanket tucked lovingly by a hand that meant to smother. Cale's wolves formed a wide ring. No growls, just presence, the kind that makes evil choose a different door when it can. Lunara moved to the bank. Her breath came shallow. The reeds whispered an old lullaby, the one mortals sing to make babies forget to die. A scrap of horse blanket, impossible, ridiculous, clung to a reed, wet and patient. You kept this? She asked the world. The world said, I keep everything. That is what makes me cruel. Lucian's voice came soft over the water. There you are. He stood on the opposite bank, fog pooled around his boots, cloak lifting in a wind that respected only its own appetite. He looked less real there, as if the river preferred reflections of him to the original. You're late, Kyle said. On purpose, Lucian replied. It is good manners to let grief arrive first. Lunara stepped closer to the edge. The water leaned toward her like a dog to a hand. She felt its cold with her eyes. You want to change it, Lucian said conversationally. Everyone does. The first moment, the first hurt, the first wrong name. Good news you can. A woman like you can tie a new knot in time while she washes her hands. Don't listen, Cale said. I'm not. She lied. Lucian's smile acknowledged the lie with courtly tact. You could take the river into your mouth and spit yourself back into the world with a different story. Rissa would call you daughter. The blacksmith would teach you curses first, so the prayers felt like a choice. The constable would marry far away and never come to your village at all. Old Mara would live long enough to die warm. Mara snorted from the trees. I die how I like. Lucian spread a hand, gracious. She dies how she likes. And what do I become? Lunara asked quietly. Lucian's eyes warmed, almost kind. Something that doesn't cost so much to love. Kale's hand found hers without asking. He means something easier to use. Lucian's gaze sharpened. She means something that doesn't run you like a fever, brother. Something that lets you sleep. Sleep is for men whose vows did not matter, Kale said. Or men who learned when to wake, Lucian returned. The river swelled, listening, delighted. It offered up little mouths, eddies with teeth. Lunara stepped back. The pendant burned hard enough to hurt. She put her fingers to it and felt the shape of the crescent like a wound that had chosen to be pretty. You don't want me, she said, sudden clarity ringing like a struck bell. You want what I'll undo. Lucian didn't deny it. His honesty was a lavish gift he used sparingly. I want the year the gods took from me. I want the day before I was exiled. I want a brother who bent when I pushed, and a throne that bent further. I want a world arranged politely around my ache. Kale's jaw flexed. And the dead? They're very quiet when you give them what they asked for, Lucian said. What did they ask for? Lunara whispered. Meaning, Lucien said. They always ask for meaning. The river surged. The reeds bowed. Lunara's knees loosened and locked. The world tilted 1 degree, too. It wanted to lay her down and call it rest. Kale stepped in front of her and the tilt corrected. Not on the ground, in her. Look at me, he said. She did. Remember the hunt, he said. Not its quarry, its path. Images leaped. Kale's hands on a map he couldn't show anyone, the line he'd drawn across winters with the hunger of a man who had starved his heart on purpose. The pack moving in seasons instead of weeks. The little, ordinary mistakes he made so he could smell where she had learned to forgive herself for being strange. It was always you, she breathed. There was never a world where it wasn't, he said. Say it, Lucian murmured from the fog. Say the name, try it on. See if it fits better than the old one. Kale's snarl broke the syllable in half. Lunara closed her eyes. Silver rose under her skin like tide. She tasted iron and river and rain and something sweet that had not yet happened. When she spoke, it wasn't her name or Kale's or Lucian's. It was no. The river lay down. The fog folded its hands. Lucian laughed once, honest and delighted. Good, oh good. If you had yielded, then I would have had to hate you for being boring. Now I can love you properly again. Kale's blade lifted. You don't know how. Teach me, Lucian said, and the challenge in it was not to Kale. The forest's light dimmed. Something old turned over in its sleep. The crimson moon blinked awake. Thin, embarrassed at its own appetite, and the river boiled with shadows that had learned how to wait. Kale didn't look away from Lucian. He's calling the night back, he said. How do we stop it? Lunara asked. You don't stop a night, Kale said. You outlast it. Lunara's mouth tilted, almost a smile, reckless and holy. Then hunt. Kale's answering smile was small and exhausted and perfect. Always, he raised his sword. The pack lifted their heads. The forest bent. The river held its breath like a child listening at a door. Lucian opened his arms as if to embrace an executioner. Come then, show me what you've learned with all these mortal years. Show me how a man uses love as a weapon and survives calling it mercy. Kale moved. The hunt that started before he was born, resumed. Steel drew a bright line through rain. Wolves wrote their names on mud and moonlight with paws built for prayer. Lunara stepped to the edge of a river that had once introduced her to sorrow and did not fall in. She lifted both hands. Power leaped, hot and disciplined, a net with the strength of spider silk and the kindness of bread. It spread between banks, across brothers, through choices, over a night that came back every time the world forgot why it had been sent away. Hold, she told the water. Hold, she told the hunt. Hold, she told her own heart, the river. Obeyed. The night did not. It climbed the sky on clever hands, put its mouth to the moon, and drank. Light went thin as a whisper. Kale's sword met Lucian's smile, and from the far side of the reeds, from the path that led back to Eldon Hollow, a human scream tore the dark clean open. Risa, or the blacksmith. Or a child who had just learned wolves could walk like men. Lunara turned. The pendant flared. Not silver now, not white. A desperate gold. The color of bread and hearth and names spoken over soup. Go, Kale said without looking at her. I'll end this breath. You save the next. I won't leave you, she said. You won't, he answered, and somehow it wasn't a contradiction. You'll only arrive before me. Lucian's laughter curved. How domestic. How tender. I'm almost moved. Be still, Lunara told the river one last time. Then she ran for the scream, back toward the village that had taught her to be quiet, back toward the cradle where the gods had hidden a queen, back toward the life that would break if she did not hold it with both hands. The forest opened like a throat about to sing. Behind her, 2 brothers wrote history on rain. Ahead of her, a door she didn't know she had closed slammed wide, and the chapter ended not with silence, but with the sound of her voice, ready to be used for something other than prayer. Chapter 4. The captive and the cursed knight does not fall in the silver forest. It descends, like an idea that finally convinces the world to give up the light. When Lunara reached the edge of the mortal village, the world she'd once known had already begun to unravel. The houses of Eldon Hollow. The same crooked, quiet homes that had once smelled of smoke and bread, now flickered under the light of fire. Not the warmth of hearths, but the cruel kind, the kind that forgets what it's burning. Screams cut through the rain. Wolves, not Kales, stalked between the flames. Their eyes glowed crimson, the color of the broken moon, and above it all, at the ridge where the temple ruins stood, a figure watched. Lucian. The price of safety, Lunara didn't hesitate. Her feet hit mud, ash, stone. She didn't care. Her silver light burst through the streets, driving back the crimson mist. Wherever her light touched, the wolves turned to smoke, their bodies unraveling into dust. She reached Risa's door, the small, familiar one with the chipped handle and the smell of iron. Inside, the blacksmith lay against the wall, his hammer still in his hand, chest rising shallowly. Risa knelt beside him, whispering prayers too old to have words. When Lunara stepped inside, Risa looked up, eyes wide, terror and awe tangled in her face. You came back, she breathed. Lunara knelt beside her, pressing a glowing hand to the man's wound. Silver light threaded into his skin. He gasped, once, and his heartbeat steadied. Risa's tears mixed with soot. What are you? Lunara's throat closed around the truth. I was the silence that kept you safe, she said softly, and I broke it. Outside, another roar split the night, deeper, older, shaking the bones of the earth. Kale's voice, calling her name through the storm. But another voice answered him, smooth, amused, venomous. Lucian. Lunara looked toward the door, jaw tightening. He's here. Risa clutched her wrist. Don't go. Lunara turned, her silver eyes soft. He's not after you. He's after me. Then, with a whisper that felt like goodbye, she stepped into the night. The meeting of brothers, the square that had once been a place for market laughter, was now a grave of embers. Kale stood in its center, blood on his armor, rain streaking down his face, his sword burning silver fire. Across from him, Lucian stood calm, no weapon drawn. Only the moon behind him, fractured and red, a crown that shouldn't exist. Why them? Kale shouted, voice raw. They are mortals. They never wronged you. Lucian smiled faintly. Mortals are the currency the gods accept. You taught me that when you bargained her silence for their peace. Kale's breath caught. That was mercy? Lucien finished for him. Say the word again, brother. It sounds so pretty when it hurts. Lunara stepped between them, the rain sparking off her light. Enough. Both turned to her. The storm itself seemed to freeze between them. Kale's eyes softened the instant he saw her. You shouldn't have come. Lucian tilted his head, grinned slow and knowing. She always comes when called. That's what faith does, doesn't it? Faith isn't what you had, Cale growled. You had envy. And you had her, Lucian said, eyes flashing. Until you buried her voice to keep her yours. The truth hit like a thrown blade. Lunara's gaze snapped to Cale. What does he mean? Cale's jaw locked. It was the only way to keep you hidden. They would have torn the worlds apart to find you. So you did it for me, she said quietly. And not for the throne? His silence was answer enough. Lucian laughed, not cruelly, but like a man watching a tragedy he already knows the ending to. You see, Sister of the Moon? He didn't save you. He silenced you. He caged you in mortality and called it love. Stop, Kyle said, stepping forward. But Lucian raised a hand, and the earth between them split open. A ring of crimson light spiraled upward, wrapping around Lunara like chains of smoke. Cale lunged. Too late. The magic struck first. Lunara gasped, light bursting from her skin as the spell took hold. Her body froze, silver fading to dull gray. The air screamed. The bond that had tied her to Cale for centuries, that invisible thread of shared heartbeat, snapped. The captive, when she opened her eyes again, there was no fire, no rain, only darkness. The floor beneath her pulsed faintly, like the skin of a living creature. The walls were made of lightless stone, etched with symbols that shimmered red. She tried to move. Her body obeyed, but the air fought her. Chains, not of metal, but of memory, anchored her wrists. Lucian's voice drifted through the dark. Do they hurt? She turned. He stood near the wall, his hand pressed against one of the glowing runes. I made them from your own name, he said softly. Every syllable you ever forgot. Her voice came hoarse. Why? Because I need you to remember, he said, before Cale turns you against yourself again. Lunara shook her head. You twist everything, do I? His tone was almost tender. You lived as a mortal because he made you one. He gave you silence so the gods would forget you, but you were never meant to be quiet, Lunara. You were meant to rule. She closed her eyes. I don't want to rule, he moved closer. Then what do you want? Her breath trembled. Freedom, Lucian smiled faintly. You mistake freedom for loneliness. The mortals taught you that, not me. He reached out, fingertips brushing her cheek. The chain between them sparked, silver against crimson. She flinched. Don't, you feel it too, he whispered. The storm in your veins, the power he made you bury. I can give it back. Lunara's voice cracked. And what will you take? He leaned closer, his words a whisper made of ruin. Only the part of you that still loves him. The curse outside the prison, a hollow beneath the old moon temple. Cale's wolves howled against the barrier. Each one bore scars from trying to break through. Cale stood before the shimmering red wall, his armor shattered, his hands bleeding from clawing at the runestone. His eyes burned silver white, not from rage, but from despair restrained too long. Kyle, came Mara's faint voice behind him. The old woman leaned on a staff, breath shallow. You cannot break that curse. It was woven with her name. I will tear the name apart if I must, Kyle said, voice shaking. Mara laid a hand on his arm. You tear it, and she dies with it. Cale turned his face toward the glow, whispering as if she could hear him through the stone. I told you I would hunt you home. I didn't say it would be easy. Inside the dark hours or lifetimes passed. Lucian's voice continued like a slow river, trying to erode her silence. You remember the Moon Palace, he said. You remember standing over the dying sun, choosing who would live. Tell me, did he whisper to you then too? Did he promise that your name would save him? Lunara didn't answer, but she saw it, the memory he described. The battlefield of light and shadow. Cale kneeling, blood on his hands, begging her to seal the gates before the gods consumed them all. And her, weeping as she spoke the words that bound the world, knowing it would bind her voice too. She remembered his touch as the spell closed around her. His last promise, whispered against her temple. I will find you again, even if I forget myself doing it. Her heart ached. Her chains loosened slightly, enough to make Lucien's smile fade. What did he promise you? He asked quietly. She looked at him, tears like silver trails on her cheeks. That he would always choose me, Lucian's tone hardened. And he did, and over everything. Over the kingdom, over me. He turned away, voice cracking for the first time. Do you know what it's like to be loved less than silence? She stared at him, and for the first time, saw not a villain, but a shadow still trying to find its source of light. You don't need my chains, Lucian, she said softly. You need his forgiveness. He froze. The air trembled. The crimson symbols on the walls flickered, dimmed, and the stone beneath them groaned. Lucien turned sharply. Don't! Lunara's hands rose, glowing brighter. The memory bonds around her began to crack, shards of light falling like snow. Stop it, he shouted, stepping closer. You'll wake them. Let them wake, she said through tears. Let the gods see what their silence cost. The air split. A deep, hollow note rang through the prison, the sound of the divine remembering what it buried. Cale felt it above ground. The vibration, the surge of light. His wolves lifted their heads, eyes wide. He drove his sword into the rune wall, and this time, it cracked. The breaking of chains, Lucien caught her wrist as the last of the chains shattered. The red light of his curse fought the silver light of her awakening. Don't do this, he hissed. If you wake your power fully, there'll be no place left for mortals to live. Lunara met his gaze, calm now, no fear left, only sorrow. Then they'll live in memory. That's still better than living in lies. The floor split. Light poured upward like a rising ocean. Kyle broke through the final wall as the explosion hit. He crashed to his knees amid a storm of fire and silver shards. Lunara, she turned. Her form haloed in light, chains falling from her wrists. For a heartbeat, she didn't look mortal at all. She looked divine, terrible, infinite. Then her gaze found him, and she smiled faintly, tired, human again. You came. I told you I would, he whispered. Lucian staggered between them, his cloak torn, his expression unreadable. And now what? You've woken her, brother. Do you even understand what she is? Cale stood gripping his sword. Yes, Lucian laughed bitterly. Then you know you'll lose her again. Maybe, Kyle said. But not to you. The aftermath. The prison collapsed in a storm of light and ruin. When the smoke cleared, Cale knelt beside Lunara at the forest's edge. The moon above was whole again, but dim, as if mourning. Her head rested against his chest. Her breathing was shallow. You broke the curse, she murmured weakly, but it took too much. He brushed hair from her face, voice trembling. Rest. I'll carry what you can't, Cale. Her fingers found his, curling faintly. If I sleep again, promise me you'll still hear me. Always, he said. Even if the gods silence the stars, she smiled faintly. Then I'll whisper through them. Her eyes closed, not in death, but in surrender to the exhaustion of gods. Kyle lifted her gently, holding her like something both sacred and fragile. His wolves gathered in silence. Even the forest bent its branches lower, and far behind them, in the shadows of the temple ruins, Lucien watched, eyes unreadable, lips moving in a prayer that sounded too much like regret. The whisper in the wind as Cale carried her through the mist, the night broke into dawn. The forest exhaled, not in relief, but in warning, because somewhere above, unseen by both brothers and gods, a new scar opened in the sky, small, silent, red. A whisper rode the wind. The curse is broken, but the debt remains. Chapter 5. The whisper of her name. Voiceover tone. Stillness, reverence, forbidden intimacy, eruption, collapse, aching devotion. The morning after ruin dawn found the forest quiet. Not peaceful, just paused. The way the world holds its breath when it realizes something sacred has been broken and hasn't yet decided whether to forgive. Smoke curled above the ruins of the temple. Every leaf dripped light instead of rain. The wolves moved without sound, circling a single clearing where Cale knelt with Lunara in his arms. She slept, or something that looked like sleep. Her skin was pale silver now, veins faintly glowing under the surface like rivers remembering sunlight. Every few breaths a tremor ran through her. Each one felt like thunder learning restraint. Kyle brushed dirt from her cheek with fingers that didn't know how to be gentle anymore. "She's fading," murmured Mara from behind him, voice rasped thin. "She's changing," Cale answered. He said it like a man admitting both worship and fear. The weight of a name. They built a shelter from fallen beams and prayer. Mara crushed herbs that could not heal gods but gave mortals courage. Cale refused to leave Lunara's side. He had not slept in 2 nights. Exhaustion had sculpted him into something sharper than rest could ever polish. When the last wolf took sentry post and the fire hissed itself to embers, Cale spoke, not to Mara, not to the forest, to her. "You once told me a name is a leash and a promise in the same breath," he said quietly. "I never knew which half I deserved." He looked down at her, at lips parted in shallow breathing. "If I call you, will you answer as the woman who lived among mortals, or as the goddess who once ended worlds?" No answer. Only the soft hiss of sap bleeding from broken wood. He bowed his head, forehead resting against the back of her hand. "Then let the sin be mine." And he whispered, slow, deliberate, a syllable pulled from the marrow of eternity. "Lunara." The breaking of heaven. The forest stopped. Light stuttered. The wolves dropped to their bellies with whines too ancient for fear. Mara gasped, clutching the amulet at her throat. Lunara's body arched in Cale's arms. Silver fire shot from her skin in thin, wild threads. It raced up his forearms, burning but not consuming, carving symbols on his flesh that pulsed with her heartbeat. Kyle held her tighter. "I'm here." Her eyes opened. Not gray, not silver. White, pure light rimmed in shadow. She looked at him, and for a heartbeat he saw everything. Temples drowned, stars bowing, gods kneeling in the dust of their own creation. Then she screamed. The sound wasn't sound. It was memory forced through lungs. Trees shattered. Stones split. The sky turned the color of morning metal. Mara fell to her knees, tears streaming. "You fool. No mortal was meant to speak that name." Cale didn't hear her. He could only hear the way Lunara's voice trembled between divinity and despair. The fire in her veins. She clawed at the ground, silver light bursting from every pore. The grass beneath her turned to crystal. The air warped around her like heat. Cale dragged her against him, holding through the storm. "Look at me," he shouted over the roar. Her gaze snapped to him, pupils tiny, wild. "You shouldn't have said it." "I couldn't lose you," he cut in. "You might have killed us both." "Then at least together," he said. Her laughter came broken, half sob. "You never learn," the light peaked. For a heartbeat the clearing became day, brighter than any sun, holy enough to terrify angels that no longer existed. When it faded, she slumped forward, breath gone. Cale caught her before she hit the earth. Her body felt impossibly light, as if something had already started to leave. Between blood and light, he laid her gently on the ground. Her skin flickered between human warmth and divine chill, caught between 2 truths that hated sharing space. "Lunara," he whispered again, desperate now. "Stay." Her eyelids fluttered. Her voice came like wind through broken glass. "You called me back, but not all of me can fit here anymore. What does that mean?" "It means—" She paused, smile ghost thin. "You made a home in a body too small for what I am." The glow from her chest dimmed, steadied into a slow pulse that matched his own. He pressed his hand there, feeling the rhythm synchronize. "Then I'll make more room. You'll tear yourself apart." "I'm used to that." Mara stepped closer, whispering a chant that belonged to healers older than kingdoms. "Every god who's ever been loved by a mortal dies slower but hurts longer. Decide which death you want, boy." Cale looked at her without blinking, the one where she wakes. Fragments of a goddess hours passed like decades. Lunara drifted between dreams, flashes of temples rebuilt in silver, Kyle crowned beside her, Lucian kneeling in chains of shadow. Each vision shattered as soon as she reached for it. When she stirred, her voice was softer, frightened. "Cal, what did you see when you spoke my name?" He hesitated. "Everything I was afraid to believe. Tell me." He brushed her hair aside. "I saw the gods kneel. I saw you forgive them." She exhaled shakily. "That's the part they'll never forgive me for." He frowned. "The gods are gone." "Not gone," she said. "Sleeping. And you just knocked on their door." Mara made the sign of warding. "Then pray they're in a good mood." The visitors, by nightfall, the forest began to move again, but not naturally. Figures drifted among the trees, transparent, luminous. Wolves whimpered and hid their heads under their paws. Kyle rose, sword in hand. "What are they?" Lunara sat up slowly, wincing as light pulsed under her skin. "Echoes, fragments of divinity that once served me." One stepped forward, tall, androgynous, eyes like melted gold. Its voice carried no sound yet filled the air. "You were sealed for mercy, my queen. Why speak the name that breaks the world again?" Lunara swallowed. "Because mercy became another cage. And the Alpha who loves you?" The spirit asked. "Will he survive the god you've brought back?" Kale lifted his chin. "I don't need their permission to keep her alive." The spirit looked at him almost kindly. "Then be ready to burn, mortal. Gods feed on the hearts that call them." It vanished into mist. Mara exhaled. "That was a warning." Kale answered. "Then it heard me." The confession later, when the fire was low and the wolves finally slept, Kale sat beside her again. He looked older, not in years but in silence. "I never asked you," he said quietly, "what it feels like to be what you are." She stared into the flames. "It feels like every heartbeat is borrowed, like loving you is stealing from creation itself." He smiled faintly. "Then we're both thieves." Her eyes lifted to his. "Would you still have said my name if you'd known it would tear heaven open?" "Yes. Why?" "Because I wanted you whole, not safe." Tears slipped down her cheeks, luminous, burning tiny holes where they fell. "You break every law." "I follow one," he said, reaching out, thumb brushing her tears. "Yours." The shattering, the ground trembled. A low hum grew beneath them, steady, gathering. Lunara stiffened. "No, they heard us." "What is it?" Kale asked, already standing. "The gods," she whispered. "They're waking." A fissure split the air above them, spilling white light. Within it, shapes moved, vast and faceless. The language of creation poured down like thunder reversed. Mara shouted something lost in the wind. The wolves howled. Lunara rose, barely steady. "They'll take me back." Kale grabbed her arm. "Over my dead—" "Don't finish that," she snapped, terrified. "They'll make it true." The light reached for her. Instinct drove Kyle forward. He wrapped his arms around her as if he could hide her from the sky. "Kyle!" He didn't let go. "If they want you, they'll have to drag me too." The gods spoke. One word, too large for mortal tongues, echoing through the world's bones. Lunara screamed again. Silver fire poured from her veins. Kale's armor melted. His skin lit with runes that were never meant for men. The wolves scattered. Mara fell to her knees, chanting names that hadn't been heard in millennia. Then, the light imploded. Silence. The aftermath of names. When sight returned, the fissure was gone. The air shimmered with aftermath. Kale lay on his back, chest heaving. His hand still glowed with her sigils. Lunara crawled to him, voice shaking. "You fool, do you know what you've done?" He smiled, teeth blood-bright. "Yes, I kept my promise." She pressed her forehead to his. "You broke heaven's seal." "Then heaven should have guarded it better." Her laugh cracked into sobs. She pulled him into her arms, holding him as though warmth could anchor him to mortality. "They'll come for us." "Let them," he murmured. "We'll hunt them too." The whisper. The forest quieted again, but the quiet felt different now. Thick, reverent, waiting. A breeze moved through the clearing. It carried a single phrase, soft as breath. "Lunara." She stiffened. "Did you hear that?" Kale shook his head. "No, why?" "Because that wasn't you," she whispered. "It was them. They can speak my name now." Mara stepped out of the shadows, face pale. "Then the law's undone." The gods can walk here again. Lunara's eyes filled with dread. And if they do, they'll reclaim what's theirs. Cale rose, sword in hand, though his body trembled. Then we move. Before the next moon. She looked at him. This man bleeding silver for a love older than time, and felt the human ache that no divinity could cure. Kyle, she said softly, you should have let me sleep. He smiled tiredly. And dream of a world without me? I'm selfish, Lunara. She touched his cheek. Then may your selfishness save us both. Cliffhanger, the dawn broke again. Second dawn, wrong dawn. The sun rose bleeding white instead of gold. Far beyond the forest, temples began to stir, and statues cracked open their stone eyes. Somewhere across the mountains, Lucian stood on a balcony of ruin, watching the light crawl back into the sky. He smiled. So, he murmured. He said her name. Behind him, shadows bent low, awaiting orders. Lucian's grin widened. Then the hunt begins again, this time for gods. Chapter 6. The Bond of Shadows. Voiceover tone. Recovery, revelation. Slow burn closeness. Prophetic dread. Unbreakable vow. The waking silence. The first thing Lunara heard was her own heartbeat. Slow, heavy, real. It echoed through the dark like footsteps down an empty corridor. She opened her eyes to find a roof of woven branches above her, and the smell of pine sap and iron. She lay on a bed of furs beside a dwindling fire. Outside, rain whispered against leaves, a sound that almost forgave the night before. Her wrists were free. Her veins glowed faintly silver under the skin, fading in and out like distant lightning. Cale sat at the doorway of the shelter, motionless except for his breathing. His sword leaned against his knee, still damp with blood that wasn't his. When she stirred, he turned. Their eyes met, and the world found its axis again. You're alive, he said, voice rough with sleeplessness. Lunara tried to speak. No sound came, only a tremor in the air, a shimmer of half-formed words. He was beside her in an instant. Easy, the voice hasn't settled yet. The gods didn't take it this time. They're only deciding what price to charge. Her lips parted. You broke every law. I've broken worse, he said softly. The truth beneath silence. When the rain stopped, Mara arrived with herbs wrapped in bark. She glanced at Cale's hand, still scarred with silver sigils, and muttered, You two have started a war that hasn't been fought since the stars were young. Cale ignored her. Tell me what's happening to her. Mara laid a palm on Lunara's throat, feeling the faint hum beneath the skin. Not a curse, a seal. It was never meant to punish you, girl. It was meant to hide you, Lunara frowned. Hide me from whom? The ones who killed your kin, Mara said. The divine and the damned both hunted your kind. They feared the voice that could name them. Lunara's fingers tightened on the blanket. Name them? Cale met her gaze. Your voice wasn't just sound, it was creation. You spoke and the world obeyed, Mara nodded grimly. And when the gods turned on each other, they silenced you so you wouldn't be forced to choose a side. A cold ache spread through Lunara's chest. Not punishment, protection, but protection bought with erasure. And now? She whispered. Now, Mara said. Every creature that remembers fear has felt your pulse again. The divine know you breathe. The damned know you bleed. Both will come. The bond that night the forest burned blue with fireflies. Cale set traps around the perimeter, though no mortal threat would dare enter. When he returned, Lunara was sitting by the fire, fingers tracing the scars on his palm, the marks her power had left there. They won't fade, he said. They're not wounds, she murmured. They're bonds, he sat beside her. For a long time, neither spoke. When she finally broke the silence, her voice carried the hush of prophecy. When you spoke my name, part of me went into you. You bear it now. My power, my curse, my enemies. He looked at his hand, then at her. Then we share the target. It's not that simple, she said. If I die, it will take you with me, he smiled faintly. Then I'll just have to outlive you. Her laugh was small, startled. You joke too easily about death. I've met it, he replied. It has worse manners than you think. The laughter faded. What remained between them was a quiet so fragile that even the wind respected it. The shadows stir. The next 3 days passed like borrowed time. They moved deeper into the forest, toward the mountain that once housed the Sanctum of Echoes, a ruin older than gods, said to remember every voice ever silenced. Lunara walked slower each day. Her glow dimmed with the setting sun. Kyle carried her when her strength failed. At night she dreamed of light falling through water and woke with words burning behind her teeth. Sometimes she whispered them without meaning to, and small miracles happened, dew freezing into glass, stones blooming with silver moss, a wolf cub born blind suddenly seeing. Kale watched each miracle with wonder that bordered fear. You're remembering too fast, he warned. If I don't, they'll find me blind, she said. I need to remember what I was. Remember the woman, too, he said quietly. The one who laughed when she burned bread. The one who scolded the blacksmith's wife for feeding strays. I fell in love with her first. Her chest tightened. You fell in love with both. You just didn't know their names. He didn't deny it. The dream of chains on the 4th night, Kyle dreamt. He stood in the ruins of the Moon Palace, moonlight bleeding through the broken ceiling. Lunara stood at the center, chained in light, her eyes full of tears. Don't speak it again, she said in the dream. Another whisper of my name and the sky will fall. He reached for her. Then let it. The chains shattered, and the moon itself cracked, pouring fire over everything. He woke with blood on his lips, and Lunara's hand on his chest. You were calling for me, she said softly. Did I say your name? Only half of it, she murmured. The forest stopped breathing until you woke. He caught her hand, pressed it to his mouth. Then I'll whisper nothing. Her voice trembled. Don't make promises you'll have to break. The message in the dark by dawn, Mara was gone. Only her staff remained, half buried in moss. On it, carved freshly by invisible hands, were words that hadn't been there before. They come. Kale's jaw tightened. Which side? Lunara looked north, where the wind carried the smell of burnt iron. Both. Before he could answer, shadows moved through the trees, thin, swift, deliberate. Kale drew his blade. Stay behind me. I can fight, she said. You can die, he replied. The first creature stepped into view, a tall figure in armor that shimmered like water, face hidden behind a mirrored helm. Behind it came others, some radiant as dawn, others black as starless night, the divine and the damned, side by side. Kale hissed. They shouldn't stand together. They've made a truce, Lunara whispered, to end the mistake they both made. And that mistake is you? Yes. The battle of breaths, they didn't speak again. Kale lunged as the first spear of light cut through the air. The clash sounded like thunder grinding teeth. He fought not as a man, but as a creed, each strike a prayer of defiance. The wolves emerged from shadow to join him, silver eyes burning. Lunara raised her hands. The ground shuddered, vines turning to chains of light. She didn't summon death, she summoned balance. Each enemy that struck fell without blood. They simply ceased to exist, rewritten into silence. But with every spell, her glow dimmed. Kyle saw it. Enough! I can't stop, she gasped. If I stop, they'll reach you. They can reach me, he said, catching her wrist mid-spell. They can't take me, the contact backfired. Their powers collided, his silver marks flaring, hers erupting into white flame. The explosion threw them both to the ground. When the light cleared, the battlefield was empty. The enemies were gone, but so was the forest around them. Only ash remained. The Kostkale staggered to his feet. His armor had melted into his skin. Lunara! She lay motionless, surrounded by a faint halo of smoke. He dropped beside her, shaking her shoulder. Her eyes opened weakly. You said they couldn't take you. They didn't. Then why does it feel like they took everything else? He couldn't answer. She reached up, tracing the mark on his throat where her light had branded him. We're bound now, truly. What does that mean? If one of us calls the other's name, both powers will awaken. It will protect us, or destroy the world trying. He looked at the mark glowing under her skin, and the one on his own hand. Then we don't speak names anymore. She smiled faintly. That's what the gods said last time. The night within they made camp among the ashes. No stars showed. Even the moon hid Kale-sat guard sword across his knees. Every so often he looked at her, at the soft glow that refused to fade even in exhaustion. When he thought she slept, she spoke. You should hate me. He didn't turn. I do. Why? Because loving you hurts more. Silence stretched, fragile as glass. Then she whispered, then let the hurt keep you alive. He finally looked at her. It already does. She reached for him. Their fingers met, his scarred with her light, hers trembling with fatigue. Between their palms, the marks blazed once, recognizing each other. It felt like home. It felt like warning. They didn't pull away. The prophecy of the bond before dawn, Lunara dreamed. A voice, not hers, not Kale's, spoke from the horizon of her mind. 2 hearts, 1 shadow. 2 names, 1 vow. If love breaks the seal again, the sun will burn out to listen. She woke, gasping. Kyle's hand was already on her shoulder. What did you see? The gods spoke. And? They said love itself is the next curse. He exhaled slowly. Then we'll survive it like all the others. You can't fight prophecy. Then I'll out-stubborn it. Her laugh was wet with tears. You're impossible. Unkillable, he corrected, smiling. But in his chest he felt the truth settle heavy. The bond between them had stopped being sanctuary. It was becoming a beacon, and every creature born of shadow could now see it. The shadow approaches, as the first light touched the horizon. Kyle looked east. The sun rose weakly, pale as milk. Across the ash plains, something vast moved. A tide of darkness walking upright. Lunara followed his gaze, dread tightening her throat. It's him, Lucian? She nodded. And not alone. The dark line stretched to the horizon. Thousands of figures, half divine, half damned, all marching toward the last glow of her power. Kale gripped his sword, silver runes flaring to life. Then the hunt ends where it began. No, she said, stepping beside him. It only changes hunters. Their eyes met, hers bright, his burning. 2 lights born from the same wound. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of iron and prophecy. Kyle smiled grimly. Bond of shadows, then. Until the last dawn, Lunara reached for his hand. Their fingers locked. Until the last dawn. Chapter 7. The Siege of the Moon Palace. Voiceover tone. Rising dread. Battle grandeur. Helpless love. Tragic beauty. Cliffhanger. The approach. The wind changed first. It came from the east, smelling of iron and old prayers. Kale knew that scent. He had worn it once. War. From the ridge above the ash plains, he could see the black tide rolling toward them. Thousands of armored wolves, their eyes gleaming red beneath the dying sun. Between their ranks, banners fluttered, Lucian's mark. The moon split in 2. At their head rode Lucian himself, cloak snapping like a flag of defiance, smile carved from something older than hate. Beside Kyle, Lunara's breath came sharp. The mark on her throat pulsed violently, silver bleeding through her skin like lightning through fog. He's close, she whispered. Kale's knuckles whitened on his sword. He always was. The broken throne, they had reached the ruins of the Moon Palace, the birthplace of her silence, the grave of her first name, half buried in vines and moon-white dust. The once shining fortress now stood like a skeleton remembering how to breathe. Kyle had spent years avoiding this place. Now it would be their fortress or their tomb. He turned to his wolves. Form the outer ring. No one crosses the first arch alive. They obeyed without a sound, loyal even knowing they marched into history's mouth. Lunara stepped through the shattered gates. Her glow spilled over the stones, and the palace stirred as if recognizing her heartbeat. Light crawled through the cracks in the marble, tracing long-forgotten runes. The air hummed with memory. "You built this?" Kale asked quietly. "I sang it into being," she said. "Every wall was once a word. Then let it remember its queen." The night before war, they prepared through the brief hours before dawn. Kale walked the ramparts alone, counting ghosts instead of soldiers. When he returned, he found Lunara standing in the old throne room, bathed in silver fire. Her eyes were distant, unfocused. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Listening," she said. "The palace keeps its own council. It says the gods are watching. Let them." She turned toward him, the light around her trembling. "Kyle, if I lose control again..." He stopped her with a touch to her lips. "Then I'll remind you who you are." Her voice shook. "And if you have to kill me?" He smiled without humor. "Then I'll fail on purpose." The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was love sharpening its blade. The first charge. The horns of the dark wolves split the morning. The ground shook as Lucian's army poured through the valley. Black armor, silver fangs, voices chanting his name. Kale stood at the front gate, his sword raised high, the dawn catching the silver runes on his arms. Behind him, his pack roared as one. "Hold the line," he commanded. "For the moon, for the bond." The first wave hit like an avalanche. Steel met claw. Light met shadow. The air filled with the sound of dying prayers. Lunara stood on the highest balcony, watching the chaos below. Every scream pierced her chest. The marks on her skin began to burn. She closed her eyes, tried to breathe, but her power didn't listen. The unraveling. The glow erupted from her in waves. Silver, white, then pure force. The nearest wolves, friend and foe alike, froze mid-stride, lifted from the ground, and disintegrated into threads of light. Kale looked up, shouting her name, but she couldn't hear him anymore. Her power had awakened fully. Too vast, too ancient, too hungry to know mercy. The palace walls shook as the very stones remembered their first song. The runes along the floor flared to life, forming a circle beneath her feet. Her hair lifted, her eyes turned white, and her voice, when it came, was not a scream. It was command. Kneel. Every living creature within a mile did, even Kale. Lucian alone remained standing. He smiled, sword at his side, head tilted like a worshipper at the wrong altar. "There she is," he whispered. The brothers Kale fought against the pressure, forcing himself upright, every muscle screaming. "Lunara, stop." She turned toward him, eyes glowing, face expressionless. "You shouldn't have come. You asked me to," he said, taking one step, then another. "Every silence you left behind led me here." Lucian's laugh echoed through the ruins. "Careful, brother. She's not the girl who wept over your human wars anymore." Kale ignored him, reaching the foot of the steps. "Lunara, look at me, not them." Her voice trembled. "I see everything. Then see me." The light flickered. For a moment her eyes softened. Then Lucian's voice cut through the air like poison. "She sees a liar who chained her voice for love. Tell her, Kale. Tell her what you promised the gods in exchange for her silence." Kale froze. Lunara's glow dimmed, suspicion bleeding through the light. "What did he mean?" Lucian smirked. "You think your silence was mercy? It was payment. The gods wanted a guardian to watch over their new mortal toy. Your Kyle offered your name in return for his throne. Enough." Kale roared. But the truth, twisted, exaggerated, had already taken root. The storm Lunara's power surged, fueled by betrayal and grief. The circle beneath her blazed. Lightning erupted from her hands, tearing through the battlefield. Kale's wolves vanished in the storm. Lucian's army scattered like ashes. Kyle tried to reach her through the tempest. "Lunara, it's not true." But she was beyond hearing. The moon palace broke apart, walls rising into the sky as if gravity had grown afraid. Lucian watched, awestruck. "Beautiful, isn't it?" A god remembering she's divine! Kale lunged at him. You did this. Lucian parried easily, eyes never leaving the vision above. No, brother. You did, when you said her name. They fought among falling stone, the clash of their blades drowned by thunder. You don't deserve her, Lucian snarled. Neither do you, Kale spat. But I'll bleed longer for her. Their swords locked, silver against shadow, brothers bound by love and ruin. The heart of light high above, Lunara floated amid the storm she'd created. Her body burned like a falling star, her consciousness split between past and present. She saw the gods who'd silenced her. She saw Kale kneeling, begging them to let her live. She saw Lucien weeping in secret as the palace crumbled, and she saw herself, smiling through pain, whispering to Kyle, "If you ever find me again, don't let me remember." Now she remembered everything, and it hurt. Her power flared uncontrollably. "Make it stop!" she cried to no one. Kale heard the echo even through the chaos. "I'm coming." He threw Lucian aside and ran toward the collapsing stairway, dodging debris that fell like meteors. The closer he came, the heavier the air grew, until it felt like wading through time itself. When he finally reached her, the light blinded him, but he kept walking. "Lunara," he whispered, barely breathing. "I choose you," her head tilted. "Over what?" "Over everything." He took her hands, though they burned like molten silver. The storm faltered. The fire dimmed. Lucien's shout echoed from below. "No! You'll kill her!" Kale didn't listen. He pulled her close and whispered against her temple. Not her divine name, but the mortal one she'd lived under. Lyra. The light collapsed inward. The choice. When the brilliance faded, the battlefield was still. The palace lay in ruin. The armies, divine and damned, were gone. Kyle knelt in the dust, cradling her body. She was breathing, but barely. Her glow was gone. Only a faint shimmer lingered around her eyes. Lucian limped forward, face blood-streaked, disbelief softening into something almost human. "You merged the names," he murmured. "You gave her both lives." Kale didn't look up. "I gave her a choice." Lucian stared at his brother, at the woman who had once been his goddess. "And what if she doesn't choose you?" Kale smiled faintly. "Then I'll love whoever she becomes." Lucian's laughter was quiet, hollow. "You never were a king, just a man pretending his heart was armor. Better that than a monster pretending his wounds are crowns." Lucian sighed. "We end this another day." He turned, whistling to the remnants of his army. They vanished into shadow. The aftermath silence returned. Smoke drifted through broken arches. Lunara stirred in his arms. "Kyle." "I'm here." Her eyes opened. No longer silver, no longer divine. Just human. "Am I her?" He brushed her cheek. "You're both. And you?" "Still yours," she smiled weakly. "Then it's not over." "No," he said, looking toward the horizon, where the sun rose pale and uncertain. "It's only begun." Cliffhanger far above the clouds, the gods watched through fractured sky. Their voices rumbled like distant thunder. The name has been spoken twice. The seal is undone. The bond of shadows must end, or consume the world. And in the darkness beneath the mountains, Lucian knelt before an unseen throne, whispering to something older than gods. "My brother chose love," he said softly. "I choose eternity." The throne whispered back, low and pleased. "Then rise, wolf of the void." Lucian's eyes turned black. Chapter 8. The Blood Oath, Voice-Over Tone Map. Solemn rite, rising dread, sacred fury, catastrophic beauty, aching quiet, vanishing act, cliffhanger. The ruins. That remembered morning crawled over the broken ribs of the moon palace like a penitent. Ash drifted. Wolves kept a circle. The wind tried to sing and coughed on dust. Kyle stood in the nave where a ceiling used to be, staring up at a sky the gods had cracked and then thought better of. Around him, the floor wore a new constellation. Scorched marks where Lunara's uncontrolled power had kissed stone. Each burn was a faintly luminous crescent, as if the moon had fallen into pieces and tried to fit itself together with memory. Lunara, Lyra, both, neither, sat on the last unbroken stair. Her hair, once a banner of silver-lit shadow, hung damp and human against her neck. The marks at her throat pulsed in a patient rhythm that didn't belong to mortals. Every few breaths, light flickered under her skin, then hid, shy of the day. "You're shaking," Kale said, coming close enough that his shadow fell over her feet. "I'm remembering too quickly," she answered, "and forgetting just as fast. What? Which one I am when I breathe." He knelt, the old ache in his joints louder now that battle had been replaced by stillness. "Then I will remind you every time." Her smile was small and unsteady. "You always say that as if promises are shields." "They are," he said, "if you hold them tight enough." He held her hands, his scarred with her sigils, hers humming with a light that recognized its twin. The contact steadied them both. For 3 heartbeats the world pretended to be kind. A horn cried on the eastern ridge. Short, brutal, familiar. Kyle let go and rose with the reflex of a life spent answering danger. The wolves turned their heads as one. Shadows lengthened where they shouldn't. Mara came hobbling through the colonnade, breath thin. "They're back. Not many. Worse. How many?" Kale asked. "Enough to make you say the words you swore you wouldn't," she said, eyes flicking to Lunara with naked worry. "The dead march with the living now. Someone has convinced grief to wear a body." Kale tasted iron. "Lucian." Mara nodded once. "He's made a pact with a mouth that eats light." Lunara stood, the last of her tremor swallowed by a decision. "Then I will end it." Kale turned sharp. "No, you will live." "That's not the same thing," she said. "Not today." Their gazes locked, and in the quiet between them stood the long road that had taught them what love costs when you pay with kingdoms. Kale broke first. "Then we use a law older than gods who think they write them." Mara stiffened. "Boy, don't you dare!" He didn't look away from Lunara. "I will not watch you burn alone again." Her breath tripped. "What law?" "The blood oath," Mara hissed. "The binding. If one falls, both fall. If one breathes, both breathe. If one is hunted, the other is the hound in the harbor. It makes 2 lives into a single sentence." Lunara's throat worked. "It's forbidden." "So is letting you die," Kale said. "Kale, Lunara." He stepped closer, voiced the calm underneath a storm. "I do not know how to be king of anything without being yours first." Lightning sketched itself faintly across the far clouds, as if the sky eavesdropped and took notes. Mara planted her staff hard enough to make dust leap. "Choose carefully. The oath is mercy written as a trap. You'll share wounds. You'll share sickness. You'll share every debt you owe the heavens." Kale's mouth curved in a tired, honest smile. "Then the heavens will finally have to look me in the eye." Lunara searched his face as if a wrong word could unmake him. "If we bind and I vanish, you vanish. Then we'll learn how to reappear," he said. "And if the oath decides we're an offense to it and kills us both on principle, then let our principle be prettier." She made a broken sound that might have been a laugh. "You infuriate me." He touched her cheek. His hand trembled. "Live long enough to stay angry." She pressed her forehead to his. "Say it." Mara closed her eyes and whispered to the floor. "May the gods be deaf and the old laws distracted." Kale drew a knife from his belt. Black steel, moon-silver edge. He turned the blade in his palm until it showed them back. 2 silhouettes, 1 promise. "Your name first," he said. "Not the divine one. The human one. The one that chose me." "Lyra," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, say my name." "Kale," she breathed, and the blade turned warm. He cut his palm without flinching. Blood rose, bright and impossible, shot through with fine filaments of silver that weren't his. He offered the knife. She took it. For a heartbeat, her eyes were very human, brown gold in this light, soft with fear. Then she drew the edge across her skin. Her blood came slow and luminous, as if thinking its way into the world. They pressed their palms together. The oath woke. How a law binds 2 hearts. It began as heat, not the vulgar heat of fire, but the precise warmth of skin, recognizing skin. Their blood sought, found, braided. The air bristled. Runes that had slept in Kale's scars leapt awake and sprinted up his forearm. Marks that had hidden at Lunara's throat slid down like restrained lightning and wrapped their joined hands in rings of white. Mara's eyes watered. You two. Stop if... Too late. The earth under them drew a circle of light so thin it looked like a hair on glass. It widened, murmuring in a language only vows know. The wolves lay down, chins on paws, watching with the reverence animals reserved for storms and births. Kyle spoke first, voice low, steady, more prayer than speech. By the moon that keeps our secrets, and the hunt that keeps my promises. By the life I squandered hunting you, and the life you saved by letting me. By every winter I walked alone and every dawn you made bearable. Name me. Lunara's breath hitched. The light around their hands pulsed. I name you mine, she said, each syllable careful as a key in an old lock. Not as throne or chain, as home. I take your night into my mouth and keep it. I take your days into my bones and carry them. The circle brightened. Somewhere, far and furious, the gods turned their faces toward this blasphemy and took notes for later punishments. Kale swallowed. The muscle in his jaw jumped. If I fall, let my breath find yours. If I am broken, let your name be the shape that holds me together. Lunara pressed their palms tighter, their blood choosing every path through each other. If I am hunted, hunt me back. If I am stolen, steal me twice. If I am erased, say me. Lunara, he whispered. The circle flared. White. Kale, she returned. The circle exploded into silver. The oath took them, the storm of moonlight. It felt like drowning upward. Light poured from their joined hands and climbed the air in sheets, draping the collapse of the palace in a new sky. Every shard of marble sang. Every gouge in the floor filled with quicksilver and healed like a wound that had decided to trust the knife that made it. Beyond the walls, Lucian's vanguard crested the eastern hill, a dark river threaded with pale faces that used to be men. They saw the light and faltered the way wolves falter at a cliff edge. Kale's head snapped that way, though his eyes were closed. He felt the approach as if his own ribs were stairsteps to it. Lunara felt it too, not as enemy but as lack, a hunger walking in formation. The oath pulled taut like a bowstring between them. Their joined blood hummed a note that made the air shake off dust. Now, Kale said. Now, Lunara agreed. They lifted their hands. The storm answered. Moonlight broke from them not as beams but as weather. A wall of pale wind that rolled across the field, gentle as first snow and terrible as tide. It touched the first ranks of the dark wolves and burned without flame. Armor turned to frost, then steam. Teeth fell quiet. Eyes red with borrowed fury, went clear for a heartbeat and then empty forever. The second ranks tried to break. The storm moved ahead of their cowardice and taught them that weather does not bargain. It passed through the dead things that had learned to walk and unlearned them. Lucian reined his mount at the ridge, cloak torn, hair lifted by the same wind. He watched his front melt into absence and smiled like a man watching a lover destroy his house just to prove she could. Clever, he murmured, cruel in the right places. He lifted a hand. Blackness gathered between his fingers, not shadow, not night, void. It swallowed light as if insulted by it and formed a spear. He threw. The spear flew true, clotting brightness as it went. Kyle felt it coming, the way you feel a lie in a friend's laugh. He pulled Lunara toward him, spun, and took the impact across his back. It should have cored him. The oath caught it. Pain flared, in him and in her, in identical shapes, identical heat, identical radiance. The spear burrowed into Kale's flesh and found itself swimming through a different body, hers. Their blood snarled. The runes on his spine and the marks at her throat rose and bit. The spear died. They staggered together, then straightened together. Lucian's smile thinned. Ah, he made another. The storm made itself thicker, denser, a curtain you couldn't live through. The second spear cut into it and came out a thread. The third returned to his hand and burned his palm. "Stingy," he told the wind, then licked the blood with offended elegance. Behind him, the void he'd invited into himself laughed through his bones. "More," it purred. "Eat the vow. Patience," he said aloud to whatever named itself in his darkness. "We want them both." The price written into power inside the circle. Kale and Lunara shook. The oath held, but laws are jealous. For every enemy the storm unwrote, it wrote a debt in light under their skin. Their marks brightened, then cracked, thin red seeping through silver. Mara came as close as she dared. The hair along her arms stood up, her old heart remembering what it had promised never to do. "Run." "Enough," she shouted over the beautiful roar. "Any more and the oath will decide it prefers itself to you." Lunara's mouth trembled. "If we stop, they'll reach the village." "Risa can run," Mara said. "You cannot. Not from the thing you've chosen." Kale looked down. Blood, his and hers, had pooled at their feet and turned to light. "One more breath," he said. Lunara nodded. "One more." They gave the world a last inhalation of moon. It swept the battlefield clean. The ridge shone empty. Lucian alone remained, too far for their vow to unmake without eating itself. He watched, hand on his chest as if checking whether he still had one. "Enough," Kale said again. But this time to the oath, and the light obeyed, reluctant, panting, delighted with its own teeth. The circle dimmed. The cold that comes after miracles slid into the space behind their ribs. Kale swayed. Lunara swayed with him, because there was no other option. He caught her by instinct that had become anatomy. "Stay," he murmured. "The oath doesn't like stillness," she whispered. "It needs a next thing." Then we disappointed. Her lips shaped a thanks she didn't have breath to spend. The wolves, dazed and alive, rose from where they had kissed stone and came in close, forming a wall of warm bodies. The palace groaned, settling. The sky considered forgiveness. On the ridge, Lucian bowed. "You win a field," he called conversationally. "Do you want a world?" Kale didn't bother replying. "Then enjoy your altar," Lucian added, and his smile, exhausted and joyful, made it clear he knew precisely which stone to kick. He turned and vanished into a fold of afternoon that didn't belong to today. Silence. Returning it happened quietly. The oath, sated and curious, probed the new seams it had made between them. It tested the doors in Kale's chest and Lunara's throat, found them unlocked by circumstance, and wandered in humming to itself. Lunara opened her mouth to say something ordinary. Water. Rest, I am cold, and discovered no word could cross. She tried again. Noise came. Not voice. Her eyes widened. Kale felt it like a missing step. "Lunara?" She pressed trembling fingers to her throat. The mark there shone steady as a candle in a church that had outlived its clergy. He understood. He shouldn't have, but he did. "No," he said, flat with refusal. "No, not again." She smiled, apology and endurance in a single small curve, and shook her head. Mara swore in a language too old to offend anyone under the sky. The oath took the voice into itself. "It thinks the name belongs to both. It will keep it. Break it," Kale said. "Break the oath?" Mara snapped. "Shall I rip the moon down with my leftover teeth while I'm at it?" Boy, a binding is a god that learned to be a sentence. "You don't break it. You change its grammar. How?" he asked, desperate enough to be polite to impossibility. "Live," Mara said. "Long enough for it to trust you. Long enough that it forgets it was meant to be cruel." Lunara touched his cheek. Her eyes, robbed of easy speech, held words anyway. "I'm here. I chose this. Breathe." He caught her hand, pressed it to his mouth. "You don't leave me with silence twice," he said, but the plea wore armor shaped like anger. She shook her head again. A tear traced silver, then ordinary salt down her face. "Rest," he said, softer. He gathered her against him. The wolves thickened their ring. Mara leaned into her staff and promised any listening gods she would not be kind when they came. Somewhere below, deep in the belly of stone, a soft tone sounded. like a bell tested by a fingertip, like a memory rehearsing its return. Cale felt the hairs on his neck lift. What was that? Something waking, Mara said. Something that liked the storm and wants to meet the oath that made it. He stood. Lunara held to him as if she weighed nothing. We move. Where? Mara asked. Away from altars, he said. Toward witnesses. He nodded at the tree line where the forest had grown shy. Old roots. Older laws. They made it 5 steps. The air thickened. The light went thin. Silence. New. Precise, predatory. Pressed down like a palm over a candle. Lunara stiffened in his arms. Eyes wide, mouth without sound. Their marks flashed a frantic Morse. Cale spun, sword half out, every nerve announcing a hunter he could not see. Show yourself, he snarled. The world obliged. The space in front of him rippled and broke, and through the tear stepped. Nothing, not emptiness, not absence. A shape made of where things weren't. It walked like a man who had forgotten how to cast a shadow and decided to be one instead. Around its edges, reality frayed. Within, stars failed to be brave. The wolves whimpered. Mara's staff cracked in her fist. The void looked at Lunara the way a famine looks at bread. Cale took a step back that felt like stepping forward. The oath surged, white-hot, spilling pain into both bodies like a shared drink. He welcomed it. He needed the hurt. It kept him more animal than awe. Name yourself, he said. The shape tilted, as if the idea amused it. When it finally spoke, the voice arrived late, as if it had been throttled by the distance between existence and the lack of it. We are the debt. Lunara trembled. Her silence, not chosen, not gifted, taken, arched through her like a second spine. The oath pulled toward the thing as if pulled toward a lodestone of negation. Cale planted his boots. You'll collect nothing here. The void smiled. He felt the intention of the expression like a drop in temperature. We have waited. You have made binding. Easier to pull 2 threads than 1. It reached. Cale turned, shoving Lunara behind him, though behind had lost meaning. He drove his blade forward and discovered how steel behaves when asked to disagree with a whole. The sword thinned, wept bright filings, then chose to be smaller. Pain ripped his forearm. Lunara's throat burned in identical sympathy. The oath bucked. The void's almost face brightened with interest. We will begin with the quiet. It closed a hand where her voice lived. Lunara's eyes rolled white. Her knees went. The mark at her throat flared to a blinding coin and then vanished beneath skin. She made a sound that wasn't sound, air without a name. No! Cale lunged. Too slow, too human, too in love with rules. The void pivoted lazy as a cat. Its other hand opened where Cale's heart kept inconvenient hours. Or perhaps we begin with the loyal. The oath leapt. White roared out of their joined blood, unfurling into a shield shaped like a promise. The void's hand sank half an inch and stopped as if embarrassed. It withdrew, curious. Interesting. Leave, Cale said, voice feral with prayer. Soon, the void said, clearly pleased to be uninvited. We prefer the moment after triumph. It stepped back through the rip it had made. The tear knit itself, pretending nothing had happened. The silence it had left behind lasted 1 breath too long. Lunara swayed. Her eyes found Cale's, wide and full of a fear that had finally remembered how to be bigger than courage. Then she was gone. Not in light. Not in smoke. Not taken the way men are taken. Unwritten Kyle's. Arms closed on air that remembered her shape but couldn't keep it. He stood very still because if he moved, the place where she had been might collapse from shame. Bring her back, he told the world. The world, busy, didn't answer. Mara's staff touched the ground near his foot. He hadn't heard her come. Her voice found him like a hand in the dark. She's not dead. She isn't here, he said, and it was a worse sentence. The oath still burns, Mara said, pointing to the mark on his hand. It flared, then dimmed, then pulsed again, out of rhythm, frantic. She's tethered, just pulled somewhere oath and void are both comfortable. Name it, Kyle said. If I knew the name, I'd spit when I said it. He breathed once, hard. Then he turned to the wolves. Track. They lowered muzzles to the dust where nothing remained and still found something. The scent that isn't scent. The warmth a body leaves in a place that still wants it. Tails stiff, ears forward, they took 3 steps and stopped, baffled, as if the trail lifted and walked into sky. Cale lifted his face and tasted the air. "Lucien," Mara frowned. I think he knows how to talk to holes," Cale said. "And I think he left a door half open because he loves an audience." He slid his sword home, slow and very deliberate. The motion said what he didn't have words to make safe. "I will not rest. I will not bargain. I will make the debt regret arithmetic." He looked once at the stair where she had sat. He looked once at the place she had stopped being. Then he began to walk. "Where?" Mara called after, because it's good to ask a man who is about to walk into the end of something whether he knows the address. "Everywhere she ever was," he said, and the one place she said not to look. Mara closed her eyes. "The throne. The throne," he agreed. The wolves fell in, uncomplaining. The palace behind them exhaled the last breath of a story that had outgrown it, and collapsed a little more, relieved. High on the eastern ridge, far beyond the reach of vows and reasonable grief, Lucian watched through a glass of black water. He saw the moment the void liked. He saw the almost shield. He saw his brother say no to geometry, and heard the oath insist on being a country. He laughed softly and put the glass away. "Brother," he said to the empty hill, "the rules are uglier than both of us. Catch up." Below, Cale stepped into the forest that had raised him and learned how to be a knife without losing the blessing of a hand. The wind, obedient to older kings, carried his words forward. "Hold, Lunara," he said to the places that might have her. "Hold," the mark in his palm answered. One stuttering pulse, then another. Like a heartbeat caught in a net. It was enough. He walked faster. Chapter 9. The Voice That Awakened Worlds. Voiceover tone map. Frozen time. Lonely faith. First whisper. Pilgrimage through ruin. Revelation. A heart learning how to beat again. Cliffhanger rebirth. The winter that wouldn't end years slid past like glaciers. The silver forest no longer remembered spring. Its trees stood bare as confession, their branches crusted with the ghosts of snow. Wolves hunted only in silence now. Even their howls had frozen mid-note. The kingdom of the moon was a wound that refused to close. Villages burned, rebuilt, forgot why, and burned again. Cale Draven, the Alpha King who had once commanded storms, became a rumor that old soldiers whispered when the fire burned too low. "He walks the borders at night," they said. "He doesn't bleed anymore. He's waiting for someone who stopped existing." They were right about the last part. Cale lived inside that waiting. Every dawn he climbed the northern cliffs to watch a sun that never felt warm. Every dusk he walked the valley where her light had fallen, fingers tracing the scar his oath had left in the world, a circle of stone bleached white, no snow ever daring to touch it. He spoke to it as if it could answer. "Still breathing," he would say. "Still yours." The mark in his palm pulsed once every night, faint as a heartbeat muffled under centuries. Then one winter, it pulsed twice. The whisper on the wind. The night the second pulse came, the wind changed. It didn't blow, it called. Kyle had been asleep beneath the fallen arch of the Moon Palace when it happened. The whisper slid through the cracks in the stone, threaded around his ribs, and said his name in a voice the world had forgotten how to hold. "Dan Benti." "Cale." He froze. For a long moment he thought the cold had learned to speak. Then it came again, soft, breaking, hers. He rose so fast the air cracked. The wolves that had stayed with him all these empty years lifted their heads and whimpered as if recognizing an old command. He didn't need a torch. The mark on his palm glowed silver, pointing east, toward the Moon Temple, the place where she had vanished. The journey through ash and memory. He walked 3 nights without sleep, across plains that remembered nothing, and through forests that whispered her name back to him in different accents of snow. The old road to the temple had long since collapsed into the sea, so he followed the cliffs instead, climbing where the rock still held his weight. Below, the frozen surf glittered like a field of broken mirrors, each one showing a different version of his face. Young, crowned, laughing, dead. By the fourth night he reached the valley. The temple stood waiting. No roof, no altar, only columns bowed under the years, their carvings eaten smooth. The moon hung low, swollen, sickle-bright, the same moon that had watched him fail. He stepped into the ruin and the wind died, obedient as a prayer. The return of light. First, he saw only snow swirling through the broken arches. Then the snow began to rise instead of fall. Each flake caught light from nowhere, spinning faster until the air itself shimmered. Cale drew his sword on instinct. The blade caught the glow and sang, the same note it had made the night he'd bound his life to hers. The snow gathered, folding inward, shaping a figure. A woman, barefoot, hair streaming like smoke, skin made of the light that refuses to go out even after gods abandon it. When her eyes opened, the world remembered color. They glowed divine silver, rimmed in firelight. Lunara, he breathed. Her gaze found him through the veil of radiance. For a moment she didn't move, as if she too feared the dream would break if she reached too fast. Then she smiled, slow, uncertain, heartbreakingly human. Cale! He dropped to his knees. The sword fell from his hand and turned to frost, the first words after silence. Her voice filled the ruined temple, not loud but complete. Every stone that had waited for her vibrated in recognition. Even the moon trembled, pulling its reflection closer to listen. I thought, he couldn't finish. I know, she said. So did I. He rose, taking one step closer, then another, until they stood within the same breath. What happened to you? I was between, she said, eyes unfocused as though looking through 100 versions of herself. The oath tried to hold me, the void tried to own me. Neither one. You sound different. I had to learn how to speak again, she whispered. The gods took my name. The void took my silence. I took what was left and made a voice that could outlive both. He reached for her face. His hand shook. You're real. She caught his wrist, pressed it to her heart. Feel it. You're the reason I found my way back. The storm awakens. The ground trembled, softly at first, then like thunder being born. Lunara's eyes widened. They felt me return. Who? All of them. Divine. Damned. Even the void. She looked toward the mountains where the horizon had begun to bruise. They think the balance is broken again. Cale picked up his sword. Then we run, she shook her head. No more running. I've hidden long enough. Her glow brightened until the snow at her feet hissed into steam. Cale shielded his eyes. You'll draw them faster. I know, she said, turning toward the temple's center. That's the point. The air thickened. Light rippled outward from her like rings on water. The carvings on the pillars rekindled, runes that hadn't glowed since the first dawn. The moon overhead bled into silver daylight. Cale stepped beside her. Then we fight together. Always, she said. They clasped hands, their marks aligning, the blood oath reigniting in a single heartbeat. The storm of moonlight burst upward, tearing a hole through the clouds. Every god and monster in creation looked up at once. The moment before hope. When the radiance faded, the ruins stood reborn. Columns whole again, air clean. The snow gone, replaced by a field of luminous moss that pulsed like breath. Lunara's light dimmed to something bearable, mortal almost. Cale touched her cheek, afraid she'd dissolve. You came back, he said. I never left, she answered. You carried me every time you refused to forget. He wanted to tell her that the years without her had carved him hollow, that her voice was the only thing that ever made the silence worth surviving. But before he could, the horizon cracked. A line of shadow split the reborn sky. From within, it came a sound older than language, the laughter of something that knew both victory and hunger. Lucian's voice. Brother, it called, distant yet intimate. You keep finding her. Let's see how well you keep her. Lunara's fingers tightened around Cale's. The wind rose again, not carrying her voice this time, but the faint echo of a prophecy they had once refused to hear. 2 hearts, 1 shadow, 2 names, 1 vow. If love breaks the seal again, the sun will burn out to listen. The light around her flared, answering the words. Cale whispered, "Let it listen." She smiled through the fear. "Then let's give it something worth hearing." They turned toward the cracking sky, hand in hand, blood in blood, and walked into the storm together. Chapter 10. The Alpha and the Eternal One. The night. The moon stood still. The storm had burned itself into quiet. Clouds fled. Stars watched. Where the moon temple had once been ruin, now stood a circle of light, pure, breathless, waiting. Kyle lay within it, motionless, armor shattered and body failing the promise his soul refused to break. Each breath came thin and sharp, every exhale a confession of how much he had already given. Beside him knelt Lunara, Lyra, the woman who had been silence and song, goddess and ghost, memory and miracle. Her hands hovered over his chest, trembling with power she had once sworn never to use again. "Stay," she whispered. "You've stayed through everything else. Don't choose this moment to leave me." Cale's lips moved. No sound came, only the shape of her name. She leaned close, forehead against his. "You found me in nothing. Don't make me rule it alone." The mark on her throat flared, silver bright enough to turn night into memory. And for the first time since the world began, the moon stopped moving. The memory of love light spilled from her palms into him, gentle first, then fierce. It ran through his veins like rivers remembering how to flow. Beneath her touch, the ruined stones warmed. Roots trembled beneath the earth, and wolves lifted their muzzles to sing a single note of devotion that shook heaven's patience. Cale gasped. Color returned to his face. His eyes opened, blue shot with molten silver. "Lunara," he croaked. She smiled through tears. "Not anymore. Or not only." He tried to sit. She pressed him back. "Rest. Can't," he said. "We still have a world to fix." She laughed softly, the sound he had chased across centuries. "Always the king. Even when dying, always yours," he said. "Even when dead." Something within her broke and mended at once. Her glow softened, no longer the cold perfection of divinity, but the warmth of something choosing to love instead of rule. Around them, the forest began to regrow, branches sprouting new leaves made of moonlight, roots stitching the scars the void had left behind. The healing of worlds, Lunara lifted her hands to the sky. The stars bent closer, curious. She spoke, not as goddess, not as queen, but as the voice the universe had missed for ages. Every word was both wound and salve. "Sleep, you restless suns. Wake, you forgotten hearts. Let balance be reborn between beast and man, God and dust." Her power unfurled, silver wings of sound. Every wolf bowed. Every mortal dreamed of peace. Every god looked down and finally wept. Cale watched her in awe. "You're rebuilding it all." "I'm only reminding it what it already knew," she said. "That love and power aren't meant to fight. They're meant to hold hands." She turned to him then, tears streaking her luminous face. "But something must stay behind to keep it steady." He rose despite the weakness in his body. "Then we stay, together." She hesitated. "Cole, the balance needs anchors, not rulers." He took her hands, weaving their fingers, their marks aligning once more. "Then let us be the anchors. Let them build their world around our promise." The final revelation. Light thickened around them until the air itself felt sacred. Every heartbeat, every sigh, every scar between them became a verse in creation's oldest hymn. Lunara looked at him, truly looked, and memory poured back like floodwater breaking its dam. The beginning. The first moonrise. The day she had given voice to the wolves, and Cale, her favorite among them, had learned to speak her name, her fall, his vow. Their lifetimes spent forgetting and finding each other. Tears spilled freely now, each one falling to earth and blooming into pale flowers. "I remember everything," she whispered. Kale smiled faintly, tears mixing with blood. Then remember this too. Whatever you were before me, you're more now. Her breath hitched. I was never mortal, Kale. She touched his chest over the heartbeat she had healed. I was only waiting for you to remember me. The words became light. The light became eternity, the crowning. The moon lowered until it filled the sky, vast and blinding. A crown made of all the nights they had survived. Its glow settled over them. One beam for him, one for her, and then both merging into a single column of silver fire. The wolves howled as one, their voices woven with the echo of the gods. Kale's armor reforged itself in light. Lunara's robes turned to cascading starlight. He reached for her, and where their hands met, the beam solidified into a throne made of moonstone and breath. Alpha King, the wind proclaimed. Goddess of silence, the earth answered. They stood together at the center of the circle, the mortal and the eternal, the howl and the hush. The balance trembled, then steadied. The blessing and the curse Lunara looked down at the world newly reborn, mountains shining, rivers singing, mortals stirring from their long fear. Her voice was soft but carried through every soul that could still dream. Love will never be gentle, she said, but it will always be worth surviving. She turned to Kale, eyes glimmering with both farewell and forever. They will forget us again someday, they must. That's how peace stays honest. Then we'll remember for them, he said. She leaned in, kissed his brow, and whispered the last words the world would ever hear her speak. I was never mortal. Kale, I was only waiting for you to remember me. Eternal Guardians. The moon flared once, so bright it burned its reflection into every ocean, and then dimmed to its quiet, watchful glow. Where they had stood, two figures remained carved in light, the Alpha King and the Goddess of Silence, hands entwined, eyes open toward eternity. From that night forward, lovers prayed to the moon not for luck, but for courage, for the strength to remember what love costs, and why it's worth it. And when the wind moved through the trees on winter nights, it carried a whisper too faint for gods, but clear enough for hearts. Hold. Remember. Always.